From the outside, it looked like a glamorous tech marriage built on brilliance, money, and power. Behind closed doors, it was gaslighting, erasure, and a husband rewriting reality while his pregnant wife was locked away. This story pulls you into the psychology of betrayal, how control wears the mask of love, and how survival sometimes looks calm, cold, and unforgettable. She didn't heal by forgetting. She healed by preparing.
For 3 years, they sold the world a story about me: the unstable wife, the possessive artist drowning in jealousy over his triumphs. When I finally confronted my husband, Julian, about his affair, he had me institutionalized. He told everyone my pregnancy hormones were causing delusions. My own father in law, a man whose real estate portfolio I single handedly transformed, informed the psychiatrists. She's always had a flair for the dramatic. His lover, Chloe, paid me a single visit, her gaze dripping with condescending sympathy. He's under enormous pressure, she'd cooed. He needs someone grounded. For 3 years inside these pristine, silent walls, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply smiled, I agreed, I took the medication. And I did one other thing. I plotted. The very moment they authorized my release, his $10 billion property empire started to show cracks in its foundation. I'm so glad you're here to watch this unfold. Drop a comment and let me know what city you're tuning in from. I'm building a global map of our little alliance and I want to add your pin. Be warned, this account weaves together intense personal drama and some hard earned wisdom designed to resonate deeply. Any resemblance to actual people is pure coincidence, but the lessons learned are yours to keep. The satin of my robe feels cool on my arms. I circle the rim of a porcelain mug, memento from my mother they let me bring. 3 months back, I accidentally dropped it on the tiled floor. Every night since, I've used a razor sharp shard to etch lines into the underside of the heavy marble nightstand. The scratching is nearly inaudible, my own secret prayer. A final, definitive score: 1095. I sit back, admiring the pattern completely invisible to the staff. A perfect ledger of his betrayal. A mark for every single day I have been held captive in this luxurious prison they call the Crestview Manor. Each and every day I carved a physical reminder of why they put me here. Not because I was sick, but because my husband needed me gone. The silent, automated curtains retract, unveiling a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. It's January, a frigid haze settles over Lake Michigan. My roommate, a withdrawn woman named Clara, is still asleep, her face turned away. They say she's here for burnout. She is the only soul who has shown me a shred of genuine humanity. I press my thumb against the last etched line in the stone. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning, a black car will arrive for me. And by midday, Julian Croft will discover that his entire kingdom is a house of cards. I sit at the mahogany writing desk and power on my tablet. It's the one piece of tech they permit, and it's monitored constantly. But they don't check the encrypted drafts in my email, filed away in a folder I titled Rose Garden Schematics. 127 pages. I call it my Project Demolition. It was 3 years in the making. Every fraudulent permit Arthur will uncover, every offshore account he will freeze, every iconic building design Julian stole from me that I will publicly reclaim, brick by brick, until nothing remains for him but the stark reality of his actions. I scan it one last time. Phase 1: the injunction. File for divorce and have a judge freeze all personal, marital, and corporate assets within 6 hours of my departure. Phase 2: the cornerstone leak. Release my original digitally watermarked architectural blueprints for his flagship skyscraper, proving I am the true designer. Phase 3: the penthouse papers. Expose the $50 million residence Julian secretly purchased for her, funneling corporate funds to do it. I have memorized every single byte of this data. I have reviewed these documents so many times, the text is seared onto my brain. But I can't take the device with me. It's against the rules here. All electronics are wiped clean at discharge. I have no intention of leaving behind a digital breadcrumb trail leading to the incoming hurricane. So I will wipe it clean myself. At 7:30, a gentle chime announces breakfast. Elara, your lawyer is on the video conference line, a nurse announces through my door. I look over at Clara. She's awake now, her gaze sharp and intelligent. The Barracuda? She whispers. That's the one, I confirm. She gives a slight nod. Tear it all down, dear. I hold her gaze. Clara speaks little but misses nothing. She has observed me for months, a quiet conspirator in this silent battle. She is certain I'm not insane. Thank you, I whisper. Don't you dare look back. A real smile almost touches my lips. I have no plans to. The video call suite is sterile and white. I tap the screen and Arthur Finch's face materializes. He's in his 50s with the cold, calculating eyes of a hawk. He is the one attorney in Chicago the ultra rich genuinely fear. He accepted my case because he smelled a generational takedown. He didn't just think I was sane, he knew I was a loaded weapon. Arthur, tomorrow, 9 a.m., I state. The car is confirmed, he replies, his voice a low rumble. Everything is staged. The motions are ready to file. Dr. An has the full psychiatric workup prepared to file the instant they try to challenge your mental state. The second you are clear of that property, we begin. I shut my eyes, visualizing it. Julian, in his penthouse office, with a 360-degree view, the one I designed for him. He'll be joking with his executives, mapping out a future that has erased me completely. And then his legal counsel will burst in, holding a fresh court order. All accounts, both private and business, are frozen solid. An emergency injunction has been granted. He won't have a clue it was coming. His ego won't allow him to imagine it, I say. Ego is a fatal flaw, Arthur responds. We have 15 minutes, go over the sequence for the blueprint leak. I do. I outline the entire strategy, the secured European servers, the respected architectural journalist who's been primed for the exclusive. Arthur just listens, his expression unreadable. He poses two pointed questions. I answer them perfectly. When the on-screen timer shows 2 minutes left, he says, Get some sleep, Ilara. Tomorrow we bring down an empire. I've been bringing it down in my head for 3 years, I reply. Tomorrow is just the demolition. I disconnect the call before he can say more. Back in my suite, I open the tablet and start the deep-level erasure protocol. Clara stands near the door, humming a quiet tune, a subtle warning system in case a staff member walks by. Are we clear? I ask. Crystal, she breathes. Go ahead. I sit down on the rug and start the 7-pass data wipe. The thin progress bar inches its way across the screen. 3 years of proof, of suppressed fury, of painstakingly built revenge, all dissolving into scrambled, irretrievable code. I stay there until the process is finished. The screen is now glowing with the device's original setup menu. It is a blank slate. Empty. Clara turns away from the door. Feel lighter? She asks. I do, I answer, and it is the most honest thing I've said in years. It's all up here now. I tap my temple, every single password, every hidden account number, every last damning detail. I never needed the physical file. I just needed the discipline of creating it. That evening, I lie awake, my eyes fixed on the ceiling. The institute is always unnaturally still. The soft-soled shoes of the night nurses, the low hum of the climate control system. But tonight, it feels like the dead silence before a tornado touches down. Tomorrow, I walk free. Tomorrow, Julian Croft will discover the true cost of scorning the woman who built him. He believed this place would shatter me. He imagined I'd come out a meek, over-medicated doll, thankful for his supposed concern. He was convinced he had already won. He was catastrophically wrong. I close my eyes and his face swims into view. My husband, the man who stole my designs, my reputation, and my life. The man who swore he loved me, even as he orchestrated my complete undoing. He has absolutely no concept of the storm that is about to break over his head, but he will. But before you witness me reclaim everything he took, you must first understand how it all fell apart. You have to know that I was the true architect of his entire fortune, how I became one of the most innovative architectural minds in the country, how I adored my husband, and how he twisted that love into a weapon against me. 7 years ago, I thought I had everything. My name is Ilara Vance, and I am a designer. Or at least I was. I graduated from MIT in 2015 with a master's degree and a thesis on sustainable urban design that landed me job offers from every top firm in the nation. I turned every one of them down. I wanted to create something entirely new, from scratch, right here in Chicago. Julian missed my graduation. He was supposedly finalizing an investment. He sent a large bouquet of lilies. Later that night, he called me from a loud restaurant, the clinking of glasses echoing over the line. You know it's a real problem that you're so brilliant, honey, he said, his speech a little thick. If you were just a little less ambitious, you'd be the perfect woman. I was 26 years old. I had just been awarded the highest honors from one of the world's most demanding programs, and my boyfriend's immediate reaction was to frame my intellect as a defect. I didn't get heartbroken, I got laser focused. I resolved to build an architectural legacy so immense that he would be forced to respect me. I co founded Vanguard Properties with him in the autumn of 2016. We started in a drafty loft office that overlooked a row of garbage cans. He was the deal maker, the face of the company. I was the designer, the one who brought the vision to life on paper. My gallery was my sanctuary with its scuffed hardwood floors, the scent of oil paint and old paper, and the ever changing light from the tall Michigan Avenue windows. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I had a laptop, an encyclopedic knowledge of post war modernists, and a passion for finding new talent. My first big break was showcasing a then unknown sculptor whose work I discovered in a dusty warehouse. I poured everything into her first solo show. I worked until dawn for months, living on coffee and takeout. When the entire collection sold out on opening night, Julian held me and wept. He told me my vision was unlike anything he'd ever seen. That one show put my gallery on the map. By 2018, we were in a sprawling new space in the Gold Coast, with a staff of 10 and a roster of celebrated artists. We had a wait list for private viewings, a booming bottom line, and I had a diamond on my finger. Julian Sterling was a decade my senior, a handsome real estate developer with a business degree and a portfolio of ambitious but underfunded projects. When we first met, he called me his muse. 2 years into our marriage, right after the little blue line appeared on the test, he asked me to consider stepping away from the daily grind. I should have recognized the shift, but he was my husband, and my doctor had been warning me about my blood pressure. Julian framed it with that tender concern he had mastered. He said it was for our baby, for our new family. He just wanted to wrap me in cotton wool. So I listened. I hired a new gallery director, a woman named Clara, in the fall of 2019. I gave her my office overlooking the park, my client list, and control over 3 of our most important artist portfolios. Within half a year, I knew it was a terrible decision. She alienated a key collector with her arrogance. She mishandled a delicate consignment, costing us a fortune. She passed on a brilliant young painter I had been courting for years, then blamed the market when our quarterly profits dipped. I spent more time cleaning up her messes from home than I did focusing on the baby. But I could never bring myself to fire her. Every time I considered it, I'd hear Julian's voice in my head. You need to delegate, Chloe. Family is our priority now. Our Sunday brunches at his parents' Lake Forest estate became an obligation. His mother would serve mimosas and quiche, and his father would hold court on the veranda. Julian was always there, soaking up the praise for his latest development deal, while I sat beside him, my growing belly a constant topic of conversation. My best friend Eva, my lead curator, would sometimes come, her eyes full of a concern I couldn't yet name. I went out of a sense of marital duty, but the warmth I once felt there had chilled. One afternoon in the spring of 2020, I went looking for the guest bathroom and passed Julian's father's library. The mahogany door was open a crack. I could hear their voices. Julian needs to be the face of this family, his father said, his tone resolute. He's the man building an empire. Lenders respond to that. She built her reputation from scratch, Charles, his mother replied, her voice soft but firm. She got lucky with a few good artists, his father dismissed. Julian has the killer instinct. He just needs a wife who is a partner, not a competitor. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand flat against the cool, painted wall, feeling something vital crack inside me. I didn't confront them. I just slipped back to the brunch table, feigned a headache, and we drove home to Chicago in a strained quiet. I never told Julian what I'd overheard, but I started quietly re engaging with my most important clients myself. Then, in March of 2021, Chicago Style magazine ran a cover story on the city's cultural leaders. The headline read, "The Curator Queen, Chloe Sterling and the New Art Boom." Inside was a stunning full page photograph of me in the main gallery, standing before a massive, vibrant canvas that was my latest acquisition. The article described my eye for talent as visionary and singular, calling me one of the most influential figures in the Midwest art scene. I brought a copy to brunch that Sunday. Julian was already on his second Bloody Mary. He looked at the cover, his eyes scanning the headline, before setting it aside on a side table without a word. But I saw the tightening around his mouth, the way his fingers squeezed the highball glass. His jaw was a knot of steel. He never said congratulations. He didn't mention it again. That autumn, I was honored with the Vanguard Award for contribution to the arts. The benefit was a black tie affair at the Art Institute of Chicago in October. Julian's mother insisted on buying me a new designer gown. Even Ava bought a new dress. Julian came, of course, as my devoted husband. His father had a last minute board meeting he couldn't miss. I won. When they announced my name, a jolt went through me. I moved toward the podium, accepted the heavy abstract sculpture, and gave a short speech thanking my artists, my team, and my family. My gaze swept the ballroom and found Julian at our table. He was standing and applauding with everyone else, but his smile never reached his eyes. Later that evening, as we waited for the valet in the museum's grand entrance, I watched my family gather their things. His mother hugged me, her voice thick with emotion, as she told me how proud she was. Ava squeezed my hand and whispered, "This is all you, Chloe, all you." And Julian, he was the last to walk over. He stood directly in my path, his eyes dropping to the award I was holding. "Soak it in," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "These things are fleeting." I didn't fully grasp the menace in his tone then, but I should have, because that was the night my husband began planning his great betrayal. The first sign came on November 5th, 2023, at 2:13 in the morning. That one small detail was the loose thread that would unravel everything. It was just a quiet notification on a screen. I was in our library overlooking the park, the city lights blurred by a soft rain. My phone lit up at 2:13 a.m. Sleep had become a stranger, my mind a constant churn of anxieties about the baby, now only weeks away. I was 7 months along, curled up in an armchair with a cup of herbal tea, listening to the storm. Julian was out of town, a business trip. The notification read, "Geofence alert. Vehicle has left primary zone." No other explanation, just those 7 words. I felt the baby stir, a slow roll beneath my ribs, as a wave of nausea hit me. The primary zone was our home, our garage. We had a new state-of-the-art smart home system Julian had installed, a $500,000 network that controlled everything. He said it was for my peace of mind. Our entire life was on the line. "What kind of alert?" I mumbled to myself. I tried calling Julian, but it went straight to his voicemail. He was supposed to be in Milwaukee for a final inspection of a new property. I grabbed the master tablet from the charging dock, my keys, and I drove to his downtown office, my heart pounding against my ribs. I arrived at the Sterling Tower at 2:45 a.m. The building was a dark needle against the stormy sky, a monument of glass and ambition. A few late-night finance guys were in the lobby, looking exhausted under the fluorescent lights. I used my spousal override card and took the elevator to the penthouse suite. His office manager, a calm, efficient woman I trusted, was waiting for me. I'd called her from the car. "Chloe," she said, her expression grim, "we have an issue." "Where is Julian's car?" "He took the company town car to the airport yesterday. Said he was going to Wisconsin for a few days." That made me freeze. Julian never took the town car. He loved driving his own sedan. "Show me," I said. We walked over to her desk. The ride up in the humming elevator had been agonizingly slow. When we got to her workstation, I saw it, a digital footprint. Someone had been accessing sensitive company files from an unauthorized location. "What's happening?" Julian asked, stepping out of the small conference room. His face was a picture of sleepy confusion. "What do you mean, what's happening? Why is your car not at the airport?" He waved a dismissive hand. "I had a change of plans. I'm pulling up the vehicle's trip history on the tablet, my fingers fumbling as I navigate the app he had so proudly demonstrated for me weeks earlier." He was lying. The car was not in Milwaukee. The log showed it parked at a residential loft address in the West Loop, where it had been all night. The digital signature on the file access logs was his. It had been faked. "I didn't authorize these transfers," I said, my voice shaking. He glanced at the screen. "I found a vulnerability in our offshore accounts. I moved things around. We averted a major security breach." My blood ran cold. "You what? You moved millions of dollars from our joint holdings without my signature?" "It was a necessary precaution," he said, his tone infuriatingly calm. "Our money is safer now. You can't just liquidate our shared assets without my consent." My voice cracked, raw and loud in the silent office. The manager looked at the floor, pretending to be invisible. "These are my accounts too, Julian. My investments, my inheritance. If this deal collapses, it won't collapse," he said smoothly. "You don't know that." The champagne flutes chimed like tiny bells as the server navigated the crowded living room. Our Manhattan penthouse was suffocating with the scent of lilies and success. I turned to my husband, Ethan. "Kill the deal. Tell this artist we're pulling her exhibition." "Elena, you're being emotional," Ethan murmured, his hand resting on the small of my back. "Now," I whispered, my voice ablaze. He just gave me a placating smile and turned back to his conversation, launching into a toast for the gallery's new star. But it was too late. At 9:22 p.m., my world began to unravel. It wasn't a suspicion, it was a certainty. Alarms were going off in my head, a cacophony of gut feelings I'd ignored for months. Every charming smile he gave her, every casual touch of her arm, flashed across my mind like a warning light. The affair wasn't a possibility, it was a five-alarm fire. My life's data, our marriage, was being stolen at an impossible rate. "Stop it," I mouthed at him across the room. I turned to walk toward our private study, needing to escape, to breathe. But the stress, the public betrayal, the months of lies, it all crashed down on me. A wave of dizziness washed over me, a sharp twisting pain gripping my 7-month pregnant belly. I stumbled, my balance vanishing. My head struck the sharp corner of a marble console table. I felt a blinding, searing pain, and then the world collapsed into silence, the sound of the party fading into a distant, mocking laugh. When I opened my eyes, my best friend Lara was kneeling over me, her face a mask of fear. The air smelled of expensive perfume and panic. My head was pounding. I tried to sit up. My hand flew to my belly. "My baby," I choked out. "You're okay? You're okay?" she said, her voice unsteady. "An ambulance is on its way." I looked past her at the scene of the party. The celebration had turned into a spectacle. And there, standing under the spotlight of our track lighting, were Ethan and the artist, Sophia. His arm was around her, not in comfort, but in ownership. Her data, her secrets, her entire professional life was entangled with his. Liam Harrison, 65 years old, CEO of our biggest corporate sponsor. He had a wife battling cancer, Ava Chen, 41, a major collector and city councilwoman. She was a recent widow who served on 3 museum boards. Mark Jennings, 38, a tech billionaire who had staked his new foundation's reputation on this partnership. I knew them all. They were my patrons, my allies. I crawled toward the hallway, my hands shaking too badly to push myself up. There was so much noise, so much chaos, it looked like a social bloodbath. And I kept whispering, "This isn't real. This can't be my life." But it was. I looked at the clock on the wall. 9:22 p.m. The first gossip column alerts would go out by morning. Reporters, investors, the entire art world. My gallery was about to be flooded. Someone helped me to my feet and guided me toward the guest bedroom. A paramedic was coming up in the elevator, but I couldn't focus on his voice over the building intercom. I just sat there, staring at the wreckage of my marriage, at the woman wearing a dress the exact shade as the one Ethan bought me for our anniversary. 3 major patrons, 3 careers I'd cultivated, were about to be caught in the crossfire. Because I had trusted my husband. Sophia was speaking with a journalist. My husband, Ethan, stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, his phone pressed to his ear, no doubt doing damage control with his PR team. My gallery staff huddled by the bar, some of them crying. I watched a woman in a Chanel suit walk past Richard Monroe, my lead investor. She shot me a look that was pure pity before disappearing into the elevator. I thought about the rare painting, about Ethan's voice on the phone that morning, unusually tense, about the fact he'd visited Sophia's studio at 6 a.m., hours before our pre-show meeting, about the last-minute change to her contract he'd insisted on without my final approval. 3 of my board members were furious, but that wasn't Sophia's contract. Ethan knew that. The lawyers came to our penthouse 3 hours later. They questioned me while I was still under a doctor's ordered sedation. I was curled up on the bed in our master suite when Mr. Davies walked in. He was a stone-faced man in his late 50s, impeccable suit, zero warmth, with a kind of eyes that had seen too many million-dollar divorces. He presented a business card and introduced himself. Then he sat in the armchair opposite me and asked me to explain the new contract terms. I explained everything. I told him about the frantic call at 6:47 in the morning, about a shipping issue, about arriving at the gallery to find Ethan already there, about the suspicious new addendum, about the contractual changes Ethan had pushed through without my signature, about the moment I realized something was financially wrong, about the collapse of my gallery's credibility, about the 3 board members who were now threatening to sue. Mr. Davies documented it all. He nodded, he asked a few clarifying questions, and then he said, "Who authorized the wire transfer for the artist's new advance?" I froze. Ethan initiated it. I never gave the final approval. "But your holding company is the sole signatory on that account, Mrs. Vance," Davies stated. "So someone had to authorize the transfer before it was sent. That's banking protocol." "I understand," I said, "but I did not authorize that payment." "Ethan must have." Davies pulled a tablet from his leather briefcase and slid it onto the bed. It was a digital wire confirmation. The purchase of a $75,000 sculpture from the artist, the one she claimed was damaged in shipping, the one that had triggered the insurance claim. At the bottom in the biometric authorization field was my name, my unique digital thumbprint, my authorization. I just stared at it. "Whose authorization is this?" Davies asked. "That's mine," I said, my voice hollow, "but I never signed off on that." Davies's expression didn't flicker. "Mrs. Vance, this transfer was logged from your personal IP address 6 months ago. It has your biometric scan. It has your personal tax ID number. Are you claiming you didn't authorize it?" "I am telling you," I said, "I never saw that wire transfer before today." He leaned back unconvinced. "Then how did your thumbprint get on it?" I had no answer. They stayed in our home for another 2 hours. The shock had morphed into a blinding migraine. 7 years of building my reputation gone in a single night. I had a severe headache. They suggested I go to the hospital, but I refused. I needed to get to my office. I needed to find the original acquisition paperwork. I called Marco, my gallery manager, from my personal study. He answered on the second ring. "Elena, oh my God, are you all right? I heard about the party." "Marco, I need you to do something for me." My voice trembled. "Get to the gallery, log into my computer, find the original insurance appraisals for the entire Sophia collection, the ones I filed in April. I have to have those files." Okay, I'm on my way now. And Marco, I stopped. Do not let Ethan know. There was a heavy silence on the other end of the line. Elena, Marco said gently, what is going on? Just find the files. Marco called me back 40 minutes later. They're gone, he said. I felt the floor drop out from under me. What do you mean they're gone? The files aren't on your hard drive. I checked the secure cloud. I checked the offsite server. They are nowhere. They've been completely erased. That's impossible. We have triple redundancy backups. Everything is archived. Someone wiped them, Marco said. And they wiped the backups too. I closed my eyes. My head was exploding. Marco, who has administrative access to the main server? You, me, and Ethan. Of course. It was 1:30 in the afternoon when Special Agent Morales phoned, requesting my presence at the Bureau's downtown San Francisco office for a formal interview. I told him I'd be there within the hour. No charges had been filed, not officially, but I felt the storm gathering on the horizon. The federal building was a cold monolith of steel and glass on Golden Gate Avenue. Morales met me just past security, leading me through a maze of gray hallways to an interview room. It was exactly as you see on television. A bare table, two chairs, and a dark reflective window that wasn't a window at all. I knew they were watching. Morales sat, placed a recorder on the table, and read me my rights. I focused on keeping my breathing steady, telling myself I had nothing to hide, but a tremor started in my hands. He ran through the same questions he'd asked at our penthouse that morning. I gave him the same honest answers, then he shifted. Mrs. Thorne, we've spoken with several individuals connected to this case. Your husband, Marcus Thorne, provided his testimony earlier today. My head snapped up. What could he have possibly said? Morales consulted his notepad. He stated that he expressed grave concerns to you about your new art consignor nearly a month ago. He claims he sent an email urging you to conduct a more thorough background check before accepting the collection. According to him, you said the gallery needed a high-profile win and you were willing to take the risk. The blood drained from my face. That's a complete fabrication. We have the email, Mrs. Thorne, Morales said, his voice flat. It's time-stamped October 5th, sent from Marcus Thorne's corporate email to your personal one. I never received any such email. It's sitting in your main inbox, he replied. I stared at him, my mind racing. That's impossible. He's lying. He must have faked it. Morales leaned in slightly. Mrs. Thorne, a priceless sculpture, has been replaced with a forgery. We have consignment paperwork with your authenticated signature. We have an email showing you were warned about the seller's questionable history. And we have a statement from your own husband confirming you willfully ignored his advice. He paused, his gaze steady. Help me understand what's really going on here. What part of this story am I missing? The words wouldn't come because the truth hit me like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't just been having an affair, he had orchestrated this. He had forged my digital signature on the consignment forms. He had manipulated the gallery's digital records. He had planted a fake email in my own inbox. He was framing me for felony art fraud, and his execution was perfect. They revoked my gallery license at 2:47 that afternoon. Morales stood. Ilara Thorne, your business permits and art dealing licenses are suspended indefinitely pending the outcome of a federal investigation. He read the official order aloud as another agent entered and served me with a thick sheaf of legal documents. The paper felt like ice. I offered no resistance. I said nothing at all. I just sat numb as they walked me out of the room, down the long corridor, and back toward the main lobby. That's when I saw the news crews. An entire pack of reporters was camped outside the entrance, cameras poised and microphones out. Someone had tipped them off. The moment I stepped outside, the shouting began. Mrs. Thorne, did you knowingly sell fake art to your clients? Do you have a statement for the collectors you defrauded? Was your gallery in financial trouble? The agent escorting me tightened his grip on my arm, steering me forward. I kept my eyes on the pavement. The camera flashes were blinding. All I could hear was the relentless click, click, click of shutters and the low hum of television cameras. This was my character assassination broadcast live. They were putting me on trial right there on the sidewalk. I thought of my clients, the people who had trusted me, who had come to my gallery for beauty and truth. They would see this on the evening news. They would see my face and believe I was a con artist. And in the court of public opinion, I already was. They put me in a cab, and I gave the driver the address of a hotel on Nob Hill. I couldn't bear the thought of going home to face Marcus. During the silent ride, we passed my gallery, Thorn Contemporary, the beautiful space on Geary Street that I had built from nothing. I glanced up. Through the grand plate glass window, I saw him. Marcus was inside, talking with his new lead developer, Chloe. He looked out at the street, his eyes scanning the traffic, and for a second they met mine. And he smiled. It was almost imperceptible, just a faint smug tightening at the corner of his mouth. But I saw it. That smile was my confirmation. He had planned everything. The forged documents, the deleted records, the planted email, the tip to the press this morning, perfectly timed. So I'd be the one taking the fall. The ruined reputations, my shattered life. He had engineered it all, and I had walked right into his trap. I thought my friends would rally around me. I thought my parents would know my character. I thought someone, anyone, would stand up and say, Ilara would never do this. I was wrong. The hotel suite smelled of disinfectant and isolation. I'd been hiding there for 5 days when my mother finally came. I was sitting in the hotel's sterile lounge in a painfully modern armchair, staring down at the city I no longer recognized. The decor was all chrome and muted tones, and the recessed lighting gave off a low, irritating buzz. A few other guests conversed in quiet, respectful murmurs. When my mother walked in, a flood of desperate relief washed over me. I assumed she was here to say she believed me, that she'd found a lawyer, that she'd confronted Marcus and knew I was innocent. I was wrong. She sank into the chair opposite me, her face pale and drawn. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, and she looked a decade older. Ilara, she began. I leaned in, my heart pounding with hope. Mom, thank God, you have to help me. She held up a hand, cutting me off. If this was a mistake, Ilara, you need to admit it. The air rushed out of my chest. What? Marcus explained everything, she said, her voice laced with a gentle, pitying tone that felt like acid. He told us how much pressure you've been under, working 16-hour days and with a baby on the way. He thinks you were so overwhelmed you might have just forgotten approving the new consignor. It happens, darling. You were exhausted. You made a poor judgment call. It felt like she had struck me across the face. Mom, I did not sign those papers. Marcus forged them. He planted that email. He framed me. She just sighed, a sound of pure exhaustion. Ilara, this is Marcus we're talking about. He would never do such a thing. He did. Sweetheart, I know you're scared, but making these wild accusations against your husband isn't helping. You need to listen to your lawyers. You need to figure out how to make this right. I just stared at her, speechless. Mom, my entire career is gone. Marcus did this to me. He has a mistress, Chloe, the woman from his company. He did this to get me out of the way. And you want me to take the blame? Her own eyes filled with tears. I don't know what else there is to do. You could believe me, I whispered. She didn't. She placed her phone on the table, stood up, and walked out of the lounge without looking back. 2 days later, my father arrived at the hotel, and Marcus was with him. I should have known what was coming. My father sat across from me, while Marcus stood beside him, his arms crossed, a perfect portrait of feigned concern. Ilara, my father said, his voice cold. No hello, no kindness. Dad, this is all a lie. He ignored me. The Thorn name is being dragged through the mud. Our friends in Silicon Valley are canceling their charity pledges. The board of the museum is asking me to step down. A hot wave of anger rose in my chest. My life is ruined, and you're worried about your social status? I'm worried about this family's legacy, he snapped. Your grandfather built this name over 50 years. You've destroyed it in a week. Then help me prove I'm innocent. He shook his head grimly. Marcus is going to manage the estate. He'll handle the press. He will do whatever it takes to contain this scandal and protect what's left of our reputation. I looked from my father to Marcus. He was watching me with that same predatory stillness I'd seen through the gallery window. You can't, I said, my voice shaking. I'm his wife. Half of everything is mine. You're under federal investigation, my father stated. You're in no position to manage a portfolio of this size. I have a prenuptial agreement. My assets are separate. You can't touch my holdings. We're not trying to touch them, Marcus said, his voice sickeningly smooth. We're just asking you to sign over temporary power of attorney to me, just until this unfortunate business is cleared up. I let out a sharp, broken laugh. You have to be insane if you think for 1 second I'm giving you control of anything. It stopped being yours to control, my father said, the moment you disgraced this family. I stood up so fast the chair nearly tipped over. That night I called Julian Croft, the best defense attorney in the city, from the hotel phone. I was using my last credit card that wasn't frozen. He answered on the third ring. Elara, Julian, I need to hire you. A long, heavy pause stretched between us. I can't take your case. What? A judicial order came through this afternoon, he said. Marcus's lawyers filed an emergency motion. All your assets, your personal accounts, the joint funds, everything is frozen. I can't represent you without a retainer. But you're my friend. You promised you'd always be there for me. I said I'd help, if I could, Ilara, but I have partners to answer to. I have a business to run. I'm sorry. He hung up. I stood there in my own home, clutching my phone and staring at a priceless painting on the wall. I had no leverage, no money of my own, and no family left. I was trapped. The lawyer Ethan hired for me arrived the next day. His name was David Chen. He was 29 years old, looked like he was running on caffeine and ambition, and wore a suit that cost more than my first car. We met in the sterile conference room of his firm's office. He placed a single thick file on the polished table and sat opposite me. I'm currently juggling 87 active cases, he said. I'm not going to sugarcoat this for you, Mrs. Vance. I don't have the resources for a protracted fight. Your husband's legal team has overwhelming evidence. The final insurance claim was filed using your secure credentials. You were the signatory of record. 3 insurance companies were claiming fraud. If this goes to arbitration, you will lose. I didn't authorize that claim, I said. Can you prove that? No, the original paperwork was wiped. Then our only option is to negotiate a settlement. A settlement? I stared at him in disbelief. I'm innocent. That doesn't matter, Chen said bluntly. What matters is what a judge will believe. And right now, a judge is going to believe you are guilty. He was gone 20 minutes later. He never even offered me a glass of water. My friend Lara came to visit the following week. She showed up alone late in the afternoon when the city was buzzing with happy hour. She sat down across from me in my quiet living room. Elenina, she said, her voice low. I see it now. A bitter coldness crept into my voice, chasing away the tears. Alex, I know Marcus orchestrated this, I whispered, my voice barely a tremor. I can't prove how he's hidden everything yet, but I know it's all true, and I'm going to help you expose him. How? I asked, my hope a fragile flicker. I'm not sure yet, but I'll figure it out. He glanced nervously toward the penthouse door, then leaned in closer across the marble island. I just need you to play the part for a little while longer. Can you do that? I gave a slow, deliberate nod. Yes, I can do that. He squeezed my hand, a silent promise. And then he was gone. That night I sat on the chaise lounge in our cavernous bedroom, staring at the glittering skyline of Manhattan. I thought about my mother's words, her plea for me to maintain the status quo. I thought about my father's warning about upsetting our financial security. I thought about Marcus standing beside them at dinner last week, flashing that charming, deceptive smile. I thought about the woman Isabel and the life he built with her in secret, and I thought about the 18 years I was supposed to spend in this gilded cage. I opened the hidden financial app I'd installed on my tablet and created a new encrypted file. I labeled it Day 1. My hope for a loving family had died. My belief in our fairy tale was gone. I started to build my case. The gala was on October 5th, 2023. It was the rainiest night of the year. 4 hours. That's how long I had to stand by his side, smiling as he destroyed me. But I committed every fake laugh, every knowing glance he shared with his friends, and every person who played along with the charade to my memory. I would use it all later. The ballroom was a theater of the elite. Journalists with press passes hovered at the edges, and the city's old money families occupied the front tables. The widow of Marcus's late business partner, Eleanor Vance, sat 3 tables from the stage, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief. She never met my gaze. I stood just to the side of the podium. My lawyer Alex had prepped me, but nothing could prepare me for this. The event's host was 55, sharp tongued, and completely captivated by my husband. In her opening remarks, she gestured to me and declared, "This is a story about partnership, about a woman whose unwavering support allowed a titan of industry to soar, a woman who championed his vision, who stood by him, and who puts family above all else. Because of her strength, this city's skyline is forever changed." I kept my expression perfectly serene. I had learned that any genuine emotion would be misinterpreted as weakness. Marcus took the stage to a thunderous ovation. He wore a custom tuxedo, his expression a mask of humble gratitude. He looked every bit the part of the devoted, brilliant husband. The host asked him about me. "Evelyn is my anchor," Marcus said, his voice laced with a performer's sincerity. "She built this beautiful life for us, from nothing. But over the last year, I knew the pressure was getting to her. She was working 16-hour days at the gallery. She was exhausted. She was so focused on making a name for herself, proving she was more than just my wife." I recorded every calculated syllable. The host then asked if he ever worried about our marriage with such demanding careers. Of course. 3 weeks before our anniversary, I sent her a proposal for a month-long trip, just the two of us to reconnect. I was concerned that the stress of her job was creating a distance between us. And how did Mrs. Thorne respond? She told me the gallery couldn't spare her. She said I was being sentimental. That was a lie. I mentally bolded and underlined the word. Alex was in the crowd watching. He knew. "Mr. Thorne, your wife has a background in art history, correct?" "Yes. So she is not actually qualified to consult on your multi-billion-dollar real estate ventures?" "No. But I know when my wife is unhappy, and yet you never insisted she take a break for the sake of your marriage." Marcus paused, letting the silence hang in the air. I trusted my wife to know her own limits. Alex just shook his head slightly. He had no power here. My father was cornered near the bar on his third glass of scotch. He looked tired, older than his years. He avoided my eyes. The host asked him to describe me. "Evelyn has always been driven," he slurred, his words clumsy. "She always had to be the best. I think she felt she had something to prove, marrying into such a prominent family. Did this drive ever concern you?" "Sometimes. She could be neglectful of her duties at home. She would take on new exhibits that were too ambitious, too demanding. I warned her about the new international wing. I told her the stress was too much. She wouldn't listen. Another lie. I memorized its color and its weight. My mother found me by the terrace doors on her way to the powder room. She was weeping delicately into her napkin. The host asked if she believed I was truly happy. My mother finally looked at me, her eyes pleading, her hands trembling. "I love my daughter," she whispered. "But a man like Marcus has certain needs. A family must be built on compromise. If Evelyn made a terrible misjudgment in her priorities, then she must live with the outcome." I didn't shed a tear, I just met her gaze. She was the first to look away. I catalogued that moment for future reference. I knew it would be a powerful asset. Our financial advisor, Vanessa, cornered me by the silent auction table. She came armed with a tablet showing our portfolio. She testified that I had been spending recklessly, that I had argued with Marcus about my gallery's budget, and that he had explicitly asked her to put limits on my accounts. I made a note of each fabrication. I knew which parts were fabrications and which were clever distortions of the truth. Benjamin Reed, the head of our building's co op board, spoke to a reporter on his way out. He claimed I had been difficult during renovations. He said I was demanding and entitled. I knew the real story. Marcus had donated $250,000 to his pet charity, but I had no way to prove the connection. Not yet. I watched his every gesture. The way he couldn't look me in the eye, the way his hand nervously adjusted his bow tie. I would remember. I finally got Marcus alone in the limo on the way home. Alex had told me to tell my side of the story. I told him the unvarnished truth. I knew he had a mistress and had used our joint accounts to fund her lifestyle. The digital records had been scrubbed. The signature on the deed for her apartment was a forgery. I was being isolated. Marcus just stared out the window. Evelyn, if the account records were falsified, where are the original statements? They were deleted. By whom? By you, Marcus. Do you have any proof of that? No. Do you possess any evidence at all that I have been unfaithful? The transaction logs were wiped from the bank's server. That in itself is evidence. Or, Marcus countered, you're becoming delusional from the stress and the pregnancy hormones. I did not reply. 7 months pregnant, standing under the soft lighting of our apartment, I felt that now familiar dread. My husband Marcus, a man who could sell sand in the desert, was on a conference call. Then his tablet, synced to the house system, lit up on the kitchen counter. An event reminder. Anniversary dinner, Isabel. I saw the name for only a second before the screen went dark. It's the Tokyo Partners, he murmured from his office, his voice strained. A market fluctuation, it's nothing. That was the first time I knew for sure. It was a small digital slip-up, but it planted a seed of poison that began to spread through the perfect world I thought we'd built. That poison festered. It was fertilized a week later by an email confirmation from Patek Philippe forwarded to our shared travel account, a rose gold watch, a gift I never received, from a purchase made the same night he was supposedly in a late-night negotiation in London. I sat in the nursery we had just decorated, surrounded by muted tones of cream and sage, and felt the baby stir. The hypocrisy was a physical weight. I was nurturing our future while he was investing in an entirely different one. There was no more suspicion, only the brutal, ice-cold clarity of his betrayal. I hired a forensic accountant. The encrypted file arrived on a Friday. Inside were spreadsheets and offshore account statements detailing Marcus's life. His arm wrapped financially around a woman a decade younger than me. She was an artist, of course, and on her gallery's incorporation documents was my husband's name as a silent partner. The world didn't end, it simply fractured into a new, terrifying reality. My mother cried when I told her, begging me not to rock the boat. My best friend Alex sat in stunned silence, but I felt a strange calm, a quiet, chilling purpose. He thought his money gave him all the control. I was about to show him what real power looked like. The first entry in my log was the day the file arrived. By day 100, my sorrow had crystallized into a strategy. The corporate law section of the library became my new sanctuary. On day 1, I didn't strategize, I broke. I lay in our California king bed, staring at the coffered ceiling, and shattered until my body was hollow. Alex, my oldest friend, didn't offer solutions. He just drew the curtains and let the darkness have me. I thought about our baby, our wedding vows, about the friends at our reception who called our love an inspiration. I shattered until there was nothing left but a void where my heart used to be. On day 30, my mother called, urging me to find a way to forgive him. I stared at the phone for 10 minutes after she hung up. Then I blocked her number. Alex watched me from across the living room. He didn't say a word. He understood. On day 100, Alex asked me what my next move was. We were sitting on my terrace after sunset. The city lights a cold, indifferent constellation. I told him everything. The late nights he claimed were work. The secret bank accounts, the Patek Philippe watch, the art gallery. He listened, his expression hardening. When I finished, he said, "He thinks you'll do nothing." "I know," I replied. "Are you going to prove him right?" I didn't know how to respond. I had his name, but he had the wealth, the lawyers, the influence. I was just Evelyn Thorne, a prisoner in a penthouse, serving a life sentence I never agreed to. On day 150, Alex said, "You need leverage." "How?" I asked. "I'm pregnant, I have nothing." "Then find something." He made it sound so easy, but I didn't know how. On day 200, I found it in Marcus's home office. It was a cold, modern room I never used. But behind a false panel in his bookshelf, inside an old briefcase, I found a set of hard drives he thought were long destroyed. I downloaded everything that night. 3 encrypted hard drives worth. Nexus AI's investor reports, Leo's personal crypto wallets, the shell corporations registered in Delaware. I pored over them in the spare bedroom, using a tiny book light so Leo wouldn't wake up down the hall. I filled a stack of notebooks with meticulous notes. I learned the wallet addresses, the names of the phantom companies, the exact dates of the transfers. By the 14th month, I'd analyzed over 150 documents. I knew his operation better than he did. I saw precisely how he moved the money. I saw how he funded his entire double life. My godmother, Katrina Voss, was 52 with a razor-sharp bob and a reputation as Silicon Valley's most feared litigator. She'd been a federal prosecutor who specialized in white-collar crime. She sensed something was wrong during a routine call about my portfolio. That afternoon, she met me for a discreet tea. "You're preparing for war, aren't you?" she stated, not asked. "I am." She began forwarding me case law and articles, digital forensics, international finance law, asset seizure. She never once asked who I was targeting. She'd just smile and say, "Information is ammunition, darling." On the 500th day of my new reality, I wired a retainer to a digital forensics accountant Katrina had on speed dial. I told him I was assessing a hostile takeover target. I stressed the need for absolute confidentiality. I sent the data packet on a Tuesday and held my breath. Leo never suspected a thing. On day 550, the accountant, a man named Mr. Davies, requested an urgent meeting. He met me in a secluded corner of a coffee shop, his expression serious. "I reviewed the files," he said, his voice low, "and I cross-referenced the blockchain transactions with public filings. What you have is just the beginning." I felt a tectonic plate shift inside my chest. It was hope. The lethal kind. The kind that would burn you alive if you weren't careful. On day 600, a courier delivered a package to my P.O. box labeled as architectural blueprints. Inside was Davies' complete report. He had a simple question for me. Was I aware of the penthouse in Dubai? A sprawling residence overlooking the city, purchased 2 years ago through a shell corp. It was a clean, direct question. He was asking if I knew where they went. Every wire transfer Leo authorized. Every first-class ticket he bought for her. Every extravagant hotel bill. Every single piece of my revenge. I compiled it all on an encrypted drive I named Nursery Plans. My records were flawless, filled with timestamps and transaction IDs. I hid the drive in a hollowed-out art history textbook on our bookshelf. 3 months in, my best friend, Anya, a top divorce attorney, came over. She handed me a solid-state drive. It contained a perfect mirror of Leo's private servers, cloned by a contact deep inside his company's IT department. My flight records, my credit card statements, my signature on our original prenup, not the new one his lawyers were secretly drafting. "This is enough to take him for half," Anya said. "I don't want half," I told her. "I want him to have nothing, and I want to be gone in 6 months." Anya watched me, her expression unreadable. Then she said, "My fee is covered. We serve him the day after the Nexus Gala." Why? Because you told me he was a snake from day one? And I didn't listen. A month and a half in, Mark, Leo's CFO, and my old college friend, sent me 92 files. They were hidden in emails that looked like links to baby furniture websites. Flight manifests, receipts for jewelry, wire transfers to her name, everything I needed to prove Leo had siphoned over $25 million from Nexus AI's last funding round to build a life with Sienna. We had our own code. Mark called it reconciling the accounts. I called it sharpening my blade. 304 days in. Leo suggested we take a baby moon. It was the first time he'd offered to take me anywhere in years. I said yes. I had to look him in the eye. I had to see if he had any idea the ground was about to open up beneath his feet. I boarded the jet with a cold knot of dread in my stomach. I settled into the plush velvet armchair, accepting a glass of chilled mineral water. Leo strolled in, dressed in a soft custom made hoodie and a limited edition smartwatch. He hadn't changed at all, if effortlessly charismatic, untouchably successful. He took the seat opposite me, the vast expanse of our marble coffee table between us. Clara, he began. His voice was a practiced balm, soothing and full of feigned concern. How have you been holding up? Fine, I've been so worried. I know the pregnancy has been a lot, and with the launch, everything is high stress. But once the baby comes, all this tension will melt away. You can get back to designing. We can be us again. I just stared at him. He truly believed I would just erase it all. He thought I would crumble and return to his side, grateful and compliant. Of course, Leo, I murmured, my voice perfectly placid. We'll be a family. He smiled, the exact same self assured smile I'd seen in every photo of him with her. He was certain he had already won. On day 364, I sat in the nursery and unlocked my encrypted tablet. I reviewed the data packet one last time. Every transaction committed to memory, every backdated patent, every stolen line of code. Then I armed the dead man's switch, scheduling the data drop to 3 recipients: my lawyer, my brother, and the lead tech reporter at the New York Times. My sister in law was downstairs, keeping Leo occupied. Her loyalty bought and paid for long ago. The timer was set. 3 years of quiet documentation ready to go live. When the confirmation appeared on screen, I factory reset the tablet and dropped it into the bathtub filled with water. Wiped clean but never forgotten, feeling a sense of release, Anya asked. Yes, you have no more need for that. No. I tapped my forehead. It's all archived right here now. That evening, I drew the final tally mark on the back of a watercolor painting in my suite. 1094. I ran my fingers over the faint pencil lines. Every single day accounted for. The next day would be 1095. The next day, I would stop counting. The next day, I would start my reclamation. Day 1094. They came as a united front. One last power play to strip me of what little remained. I had refused all visitors for 3 years. I agreed to this meeting for one very specific purpose. The attendant knocked on my door at 2 in the afternoon. Miss Sterling, your guests have arrived. Anya looked up from her desk. Are you positive about this? Absolutely. Should I stay close? No, I'll be perfectly all right. I walked down to the visitors' lounge. The weak afternoon light barely penetrated the large reinforced windows. I sat down in a designated chair, poured a glass of water, and waited. They entered one by one. Ethan came first, my husband, clad in a tailored suit from Savile Row, his watch worth more than a house. Brooke was on his arm, draped in a silk dress and my grandmother's diamonds. My father-in-law entered next, his posture rigid with disapproval. My own mother, Diana, trailed behind them, her face already a mask of sorrow. They positioned themselves on the sofa across from me. Ethan sat in the middle, flanked by the others like a king with his court. He picked up his water glass. Clara, he said, his voice a sickeningly sweet melody. You look well. I said nothing. We have missed you terribly, Brooke added, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Her smile was blinding, a performance for an audience of one. It has been much too long. I met her eyes. 3 years ago, she had testified that my pregnancy had made me paranoid and delusional, that I was a threat to myself and my child, and that I had tried to sabotage my husband's company out of spite. Now she was playing the part of a concerned friend. My father-in-law cleared his throat. Clara, Sterling Innovations is at a critical juncture. We are preparing for a merger and our partners need assurances. We have to present a united front. What kind of front? I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. Ethan leaned forward. We need you to sign over your shares in the company to me. It's a temporary measure, of course. Just until you're fully recovered. Once you're back on your feet, we can revisit the arrangement. A humorless laugh almost escaped my lips. Sign over my company, I repeated. It's about protecting the legacy his father insisted. Sterling Innovations has been this family's crowning achievement for sure 2 generations. Your father in law built it. I modernized it. You and Ethan were supposed to lead it into the future together. We can't let your situation jeopardize that. My mother began to dab at her eyes. Clara, please. Think of the family. Think of the name we've built. The name I saved. I corrected him, my voice quiet but sharp. Ethan's smile vanished. We all built it, Clara, as a family. Brooke nodded enthusiastically. It's time to let go of the past, let go of the anger. Just sign the papers and we can all move forward. I looked at each of their faces. My father in law, who told the board I had lost my mind. My mother, who had cried and said I needed to accept help for my own good. Ethan, my husband, who had me committed. Brooke, my former protege, who had taken my husband, my child, and my life. They really thought I would just surrender my legacy to them. The lounge door opened. Dr. Alistair Reed walked in. He was late, which meant he was perfectly on schedule. He sat at the chair beside me, opened his briefcase, and said, "My apologies. The traffic from the city was dreadful." Ethan gave him a curt nod. "Alistair, good. Maybe you can explain the necessity of this to her." Alistair looked at me, his face a perfect picture of professional detachment. "Clara, I know this is difficult, but sometimes in order to heal, we must cut ties with the sources of our past trauma. A clean slate is often the best medicine for everyone involved." Ethan grinned, certain Alistair was on his side. But I saw the signal, the way he placed his pen on the document, pointing directly at the signature line. The subtle nod that was meant only for me, the real message he was sending. The legal team is ready. I held his gaze for a moment before turning back to Ethan. "No," I said. Ethan blinked, his confidence wavering. "What?" "I am not signing anything." My father-in-law's face darkened. "Clara, do not be a fool. If you refuse, we will have you declared permanently incompetent. You will lose everything." "I already have nothing," I replied. "You made sure of that 3 years ago, when you all stood by and watched as they took my son away and locked me in this place for a crime I didn't commit." My mother started sobbing. "Clara, please don't do this to us. I spent 1,094 days here," I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. 1,094 days planning for this very meeting. 1,094 days remembering what you all did. And you truly believe I would hand you my company? Ethan leaned back, his smug expression replaced with disbelief. "You have no choice." "Oh, but I do." "Clara." My father-in-law's voice was a menacing rumble. "You are destroying this family." "No," I said. "I am taking back what you stole from me." I stood up, my hands steady at my sides. "Consider this our last negotiation." I turned and walked out of the room. Ethan jumped to his feet. "Clara, wait." I did not turn back. My mother was wailing my name. His father was shouting something I chose to ignore. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. I never faltered. I heard Alistair say something to him. The words were too low to hear, but I knew the script. I did my best. He was confirming for my benefit, not Ethan's, that the final move had been made. I went back to my suite. Anya was waiting. "How did things go?" she asked gently. "Perfectly," I said. She smiled, a genuine, brilliant smile. "So tomorrow is the day." "Yes. Are you prepared?" I looked at the wall, at the 1,094 marks hidden behind the painting, at the small blank space where the final mark should have been. "I have been prepared for 3 years," I said. "I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and visualized every moment of the day to come. Tomorrow the doctors would sign my release papers. Tomorrow I would walk out of this gilded cage a free woman. Tomorrow Ethan would understand the true meaning of a hostile takeover. Tomorrow they would all learn that you should never ever corner a mother who has nothing left to lose but her son." The front doors of the wellness center slid open at 8:47 in the morning on the Wednesday, 8:47 a.m. The doors opened. I walked out with a small bag of personal items and 3 years of strategy. A dark sedan was parked at the curb. Alistair Reed had arrived early. At 8 o'clock that morning, I looked around my suite one last time. Anya stood in the doorway. You have everything? She asked. Everything I need. You remember every step? She questioned. I nodded. Go get him, Clara. Go bring down their entire world. I gave her a small, grateful smile. No words were needed between us. We both knew the only thing that mattered now was action. The head administrator met me at 8:30. He had me sign the discharge papers and handed me my effects: a wallet, a phone that had been powered off for 3 years, and the keys to a house that was no longer mine. I changed out of the center's bland clothing and into the outfit Alistair had brought: a tailored wool coat, dark trousers, and elegant boots. At 8:45, they escorted me to the main entrance, and that's when I saw them. The media, a dozen news vans, a horde of reporters with cameras and microphones, a full-blown spectacle, and my family. My father-in-law stood at the forefront. My mother was beside him, clutching a bouquet of lilies. Brooke was there in a fashionable trench coat, her expression carefully neutral. And Ethan, in a bespoke suit, trying to project an image of a concerned husband for the cameras. They had arranged the entire thing. It was a perfect scene for the cameras. The brilliant tech founder and his glowing pregnant wife, a portrait of success and love, a story of innovation and family. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Ethan stood near the exit, a ghost in the crowd, completely separate. He never looked at me. That was our signal. He just watched, his face a mask of indifference. The ballroom doors swung open, a sea of camera flashes erupted from the press pool. Leo stepped forward, his arms outstretched, a bouquet of lilies in his hand. Clara, he called out, his voice amplified by the microphone for every reporter to hear. My beautiful wife. I walked straight past him. I never broke my stride. I never met his gaze. And I definitely did not take the flowers. I heard the soft thud as they hit the marble floor behind me. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Leo reached out to touch my arm. Clara. I ignored him too. His perfect smile faltered. He tried to move in front of me, to block my path. Clara, he pleaded, we need to talk. I finally stopped and looked him in the eye. For 3 long years, I had played this exact moment over in my mind. I had scripted 1,000 cutting remarks, 1,000 devastating accusations. But when the time came, I said absolutely nothing. I just held his gaze. Then I calmly moved around him and kept walking. The black sedan pulled silently to the curb. Ethan stepped out from the driver's side and opened the back door for me. He spoke just loudly enough for the nearest cameras to pick it up. The car is ready, Mrs. Sterling. I slid onto the cool leather seat. The door closed with a heavy final sound. The noise, the shouting journalists, Leo calling my name, the relentless storm of camera clicks. It all disappeared. Through the tinted glass, I watched the chaos I had unleashed. The reporters swarmed my stunned husband. The beautiful white lilies lay scattered and crushed on the floor at his feet. Julian just stared at the phone screen, his jaw tight with fury. Marcus got behind the wheel and pulled smoothly away from the curb. Neither of us spoke for the first 5 minutes. I just watched the world go by. The landscape shifted from quiet suburban streets to the sprawling highways of New Jersey, and finally to the iconic skyline of Manhattan rising against the morning haze. Marcus glanced at me in the rearview mirror. The suite is secured. Dr. Sharma is on standby. Take the scenic route, I said. I want to see my city. Marcus nodded and steered onto the FDR Drive toward Midtown. We drove through the heart of the financial district, past gleaming skyscrapers and historic facades, past the empires that were born from our partnership, the tech fund on Broad Street, the real estate portfolio in Tribeca. They were all still there. Our creations, our legacy. And then we drove past Columbus Circle, and I saw it. The Mandarin Oriental, 52nd floor, a suite with a view of Central Park. It was ready. Stop the car, I said. Marcus pulled over to the side of the road. I stepped out onto the pavement and just stared up at the hotel. Hundreds of my family's investors had been betrayed here. My father's investors, my reputation, Julian had bled them dry. He had used a shell corporation to divert their capital. He had blamed a market downturn for it all. He had walked away without a scratch. But that was about to change. Today, I murmured, everyone is going to learn the truth. Marcus stood beside me. How much time before Julian finds out the brokerage accounts are locked? I turned to face him. What time is it now? 9:30. He's being interviewed on market makers at 2 this afternoon. I told Marcus the prime brokerage will reject his seed trade for the new fund right after he announces it. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're timing it for the middle of his live segment. No, I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd had in 3 years. I timed it so he'd be on national television in front of 300,000 viewers when his head trader tells him his accounts are frozen. Marcus just stared, then let out a low whistle. You're formidable. Good. We got back in the town car. Marcus steered onto the FDR Drive, heading south towards downtown. Phase 1 is a go, I said. Marcus nodded. Dr. Sharma has the forensic accounting complete. I've written the emergency injunctions. The second we're in the hotel suite, we file. How long for the court to process them? 4 hours, maybe 5. The asset freeze will be active by 2 p.m. perfect. We rode in silence for a few blocks. Then Marcus said, Eleanor, are you certain about this? Once we file, there's no turning back. Julian will know. Your families will know. This is going to get messy. I gazed out the window. The East River shimmered in the afternoon sun. The skyline I had helped him conquer stretched out before me. It's already messy, I said. I'm just the one finally sending the bill. The suite was on the 52nd floor of the Mandarin Oriental, a war room with a view of Central Park. Phase 1 had begun. By evening, Julian would lose the one thing he valued more than money, his reputation. I stood in the marble bathroom of the suite for 10 full minutes before I turned on the shower. 3 years. I hadn't felt safe in my own home in 3 years. I'd been living in a gilded cage with a man I despised. Every day a performance. Now I stood in front of a rainfall shower head and heated floors. The water was scalding. The towels were plush. I closed my eyes, letting the steam envelop me. For 30 seconds, I let myself feel everything. The betrayal, the exhaustion, the weight of 1,095 days of lies. Then I stepped out, dried off, and put on the robe. There was work to do. The war room was the suite's living area, with a glass table, 3 laptops, and binders of financial documents. Marcus was already typing furiously. A woman I didn't know was by the window holding a tablet. She turned as I entered. She was maybe 58, with penetrating dark eyes and the posture of a drill sergeant. She wore a tailored navy suit and a sharp, knowing look. Eleanor Vance, she said. I'm Dr. Anya Sharma, formerly of the SEC, currently a consultant for people with very rich, very stupid husbands. She offered her hand. Welcome back to the world. Let's burn his to the ground. I shook it. It's a pleasure. Marcus looked up. Eleanor, I've prepared the injunctions, a freeze on all personal and corporate trading accounts tied to Julian Croft, a restraining order against moving any funds offshore. We're ready. Excellent. I took a seat at the table. Let me see the audit. Marcus slid a thick binder across the glass. 89 pages. Trading logs, wire transfer receipts, encrypted messages, Shell Corporation filings, everything Finn had dug up over 3 years. I began to read. About 15 minutes in, I paused. Marcus, this wire transfer to the Azure Holdings Shell Corp, the one for the penthouse? What about it? The official bank record says it was executed on June 10th, but the timestamp on the internal trade log is June 22nd. Marcus frowned. A clerical error? No. I pulled up the corresponding file on my laptop. It's not an error. Someone falsified the trade log. Julian moved the money, then created a fake record after the fact to make it look like a legitimate, earlier investment. Anya leaned over my shoulder. That's wire fraud. That's securities fraud. That's a decade in federal prison. I looked at Marcus. Can you prove it? Possibly, but it requires deep server access. How much time? A week? Maybe longer. We don't have a week. I pulled out my phone and called Finn. He picked up immediately. Eleanor, Finn, I need you to pull the raw server logs from Croft Capital's trading platform, June of 2021. I need the exact creation timestamp for any log entry involving Azure Holdings. What for? Because he faked a federal document and I need irrefutable proof in the next 20 minutes. Finn was silent for a bit. Then he said, "Give me 10. At 1:30 p.m., Finn called back. "Got it. The log was created on June 23rd, 2 days after you announced your pregnancy. He backdated it to hide the money he was sending to her. I shut my eyes. Send it to Marcus right now." Marcus's laptop chimed. He opened the file, his eyes scanned it, and then he looked up at me stunned. "This is it. If we attach this as an exhibit, the judge won't hesitate." "Good." I glanced at my watch. "What time is Julian's interview?" 2 p.m. He's announcing his new global macro fund with the anchor from Market Makers. It's a $500 million launch. I smiled. Filed injunctions at 1:45. I want his seed trade to be rejected on live television. Marcus stared at me. "Eleanor, that's vicious." "I know," I said. "He gaslighted me through my entire pregnancy while he was buying a penthouse for his mistress. I want 500,000 investors to watch him get humiliated." Anya laughed. "I adore you." Marcus nodded slowly. 1:45 it is. At 1:45 p.m., Marcus electronically filed the 3 emergency injunctions. Freeze all trading accounts under Julian Croft's control. Injunction against asset transfers. Mandatory forensic audit by a court-appointed receiver. At 1:48 p.m., Anya called Judge Miller. "Evelyn, it's Anya Sharma. I'm calling in that favor from the Petrova case." She paused. "I need you to sign an emergency asset freeze. Right now." Another pause. "My thanks." She hung up. "He'll sign it within 5 minutes." At 1:50 p.m., the signed court order was transmitted. The prime brokerage received the freeze notification. At 2 p.m., we brought up the Market Makers live stream on the 70-inch television in the suite. Julian was on set in a crisp navy suit, looking charming. The famous anchor sat across from him. Behind them, a graphic read, "Julian Croft announces Croft Global Macro Fund." Julian leaned into the microphone. "We are so excited to launch this new chapter. Together, we are going to redefine risk-adjusted returns." The anchor smiled. "To kick things off, you're seeding the fund live on our show." Julian laughed and nodded to his team off camera. He then pulled out his personal black card to pay for a celebratory dinner for the crew. He handed it to a production assistant. The assistant swiped it. Her smile faltered. She swiped it a second time. At 2:03 p.m., she leaned in and whispered something to Julian. His confident smile vanished. He took the card from her. He tried it himself at a nearby terminal. Rejected. He tried it again. Rejected. A third time. Rejected. The crew in the studio began to murmur. The anchor, sensing trouble, tried to pivot. Julian's phone began to vibrate on the table. He snatched it up. His face turned ghost white. On the live broadcast, his lips clearly formed the words, "What the hell?" I closed my laptop. "Phase 1 is complete," I said. Marcus let out a long breath. "God help us." Anya raised her espresso cup. "To payback." That evening, I stood by the window of the suite, looking out over the city. The skyline of San Francisco was a sea of glittering lights. The bay was a slash of black ink below. Ethan came to stand beside me at the penthouse window. "What's next?" Phase 2. Tomorrow morning, Mark Chen is holding a press conference. He's going to lay out exactly how Leo cooked the books and falsified the last 2 quarterly reports. The full forensic audit will be leaked to TechCrunch simultaneously. And Phase 3? A small smile touched my lips. Victoria finds out about Sienna. Ethan's eyebrows lifted. Leo's primary investor's wife. Precisely. I have the flight manifests, the receipts from Cartier, the text messages. Victoria's father put up the seed money for the whole company. She's going to go nuclear. And when she does, she's going to force a vote and hand us the keys to the entire kingdom. You thought of everything. I had 3 years to think. Leo's phone rang 47 times before sunrise. By 9 a.m. TechCrunch's homepage headline screamed, "Fraud and embezzlement allegations engulf Nexus AI." Mark Chen had waited 3 years to get his career back. Leo woke up at 6:30 in the morning to 47 missed calls. I knew because Ethan had a trace put on his line the second the story broke. 47 calls. Investors, board members, the SEC, his lawyer, reporters. Leo sat up in his $1,000 sheets and clicked the first link his assistant frantically texted him. A leaked forensic audit, 112 pages of it. Expert analysis confirming his digital signature on falsified investment reports. E-discovery files showing he'd embezzled $25 million over 3 years. By 7 a.m., Victoria was standing in their bedroom doorway holding her phone. "Did you falsify the reports?" she asked, her voice dangerously calm. Leo looked up from his laptop. "It's more complicated than that. Did you falsify them?" "Victoria, if you would just let me explain. Answer the question." He remained silent. She turned and walked out. At 8 a.m., TechCrunch ran the story as their banner headline. A side-by-side analysis of Nexus AI's real performance versus Leo's fabricated numbers. A quote from an anonymous source inside the company. "The manipulated data was used to hide catastrophic losses and embezzled investor funds. This wasn't a mistake, it was a deliberate, calculated fraud." By 8:30, every major business news network was covering it. At 9 a.m., Mark Chen held his press conference. I watched the live stream from the suite. Ethan sat next to me, his own laptop open. Anya stood by the window, her arms crossed. Mark stood at a podium in his lawyer's office in Palo Alto. He wore a simple dark suit. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. A mob of reporters filled the room, cameras flashing. "My name is Mark Chen," he began, his voice clear and firm. "I was the chief financial officer at Nexus AI. I was there on June 15th, 2021. I know what he did." He took a slow breath, looking directly into the main camera. "I saw Mr. Leo Sterling in his office late that evening. He instructed me to create a falsified entry in the quarterly earnings report. He claimed it was to correct a simple clerical error. I told him it constituted fraud. He told me to do my job or I wouldn't have one. He said, 'Don't tell Victoria.'" A reporter shouted a question from the back of the room. The article from the Chicago Tribune's top food critic went live at dawn. I should have seen the signs. I should have trusted my gut. But Ethan promised me my family's legacy was safe in his hands. He swore that our new restaurant was a partnership. His voice, smooth and convincing in my memory, now felt like poison. But my grandmother's recipes were everything. The roasted duck, the winter chopino, the five-spice lamb. They were our history, and now he was claiming them as his own, while that food blogger Chloe paraded them on her social media. I refused to let him erase my family from our own story. He was a fraud. A flurry of alerts lit up my phone. The story spreading like wildfire. Ethan ignored them, holding up in his office at the restaurant, the heavy steel doors a barrier against the world. David, my lawyer, glanced at me. The critic was perfect. I nodded, my hand resting on my swollen belly. "Are you okay?" "I am now." A lie that personal can't stay hidden forever. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from a loyal line cook. "The management team is in an emergency meeting. They're trying to figure out how to spin this." "Let them try," I replied. By 10 a.m., Legacy, our flagship restaurant, was surrounded by local news crews. Reporters crowded the velvet rope line. Private security stood guard at the entrance. Upstairs in the main dining room, Ethan was losing his mind. I wasn't there, but my source texted me the play-by-play. 10:15 a.m. They're drafting a press release calling the article a baseless attack. 10:30 a.m. Ethan is screaming, calling the critic a washed-up hack. 10:45 a.m. The PR team is split. They want to see proof the recipes are his before they defend him. His agent is stalling. At 11 a.m., a vlogger ambushed Ethan in the restaurant's private garage. The clip was viral in minutes. "Mr. Thorne, are these your family recipes?" Ethan's face was pale, his jaw tight. No comment. "Did you steal from your wife's heritage?" No comment. Is your relationship with Chloe Vance professional? Ethan shoved the phone away and sped off in his waiting car. By lunchtime, the reservation system had crashed from the sheer volume of cancellations. Kitchenware Pro released a public statement. We are formally suspending our endorsement deal with Ethan Thorne pending a review of these serious allegations. 3 celebrity chefs who had endorsed him publicly rescinded their support. 2 food festivals demanded he withdraw from their lineup. At 1 p.m., my own lawyer, David, held a press conference. He stood on the courthouse steps in an immaculate suit, his expression somber. Effective immediately, I am filing a lawsuit on behalf of my client, Isabella Thorne, he announced. We have irrefutable proof that Mr. Thorne has committed intellectual property theft and fraud, building his culinary empire on a foundation of stolen family secrets. I have full confidence that Mrs. Thorne's legacy will be restored. It was beautiful theater. We'd planned it for a week. David was painting a public narrative, making it impossible for anyone to side with the man who betrayed his pregnant wife. To the world, it looked like the first deep crack in Ethan's perfect public image. It was flawless. At 2 p.m., the James Beard Foundation released their own statement. The foundation is aware of the serious allegations concerning Ethan Thorne. Integrity and originality are core tenets of our community. While we cannot comment on active legal disputes, we are monitoring the situation closely. No further comment will be made at this time. Less than a week later, a scathing review from the Miami Herald sent shockwaves through Leo Vance's culinary empire. By noon, reservations were being cancelled in droves. His celebrity status was tarnished. His new flagship restaurant was hemorrhaging money. He was a culinary king watching his kingdom crumble. From my office window overlooking Biscayne Bay, I watched the afternoon storm clouds gather. My lawyer Ben stood beside me. The board is getting nervous. Good. What's the final move, Eliza? He asked. Are you certain she'll side with you? I'm betting on it. My former friend Anna walked in with 2 glasses of iced tea. What makes you so sure? A faint smile touched my lips, because right now she's finding out her perfect husband is a liar. At exactly 2 p.m., an anonymous message landed in Isabella Vance's social media inbox. The message contained just 2 photographs and a single line of text. The first photo was of Leo from a recent magazine feature. The second was a candid shot of Sienna, his young, brilliant pastry chef, from her public profile. On both their wrists was the exact same uniquely crafted gold bracelet designed to look like a serpent eating its own tail. The text below simply read, "He said it was one of a kind, didn't he?" At 3:05 p.m., Isabella called me. Her voice was a whisper of ice. The entire city is about to know his name. But before I reveal who delivered the final devastating blow, the one person Leo thought he had under his complete control, leave a comment. Who do you think will be the one to bring him down for good? I want to read your theories. A brief warning, this story is a fictionalized account created to delve into the complexities of betrayal. If tales of profound deceit are difficult for you, this might be a good time to step away. For everyone else, let's get to the twist. Where are we meeting? Isabella's voice was wound tight, a steel wire of barely contained rage. The old saying is true. There is no fury like a woman betrayed. Leo was about to learn that lesson firsthand. I suggested a quiet, secluded rooftop bar in South Beach, the kind with lush greenery and staff who knew the value of discretion. Ben was already settled into a corner cabana, a slim leather portfolio resting on the cushion beside him. I arrived at 9:30. A warm, heavy rain had begun to fall, tracing patterns on the glass partitions. The bar was nearly empty. A lone guitarist strummed a soft bossa nova melody. A couple of business travelers were chatting at the bar. I joined Ben and ordered 2 sparkling waters. Isabella arrived at 9:45. She hadn't been crying, she looked beyond tears. Her eyes were dark with fury and her composure was flawless. She wore an elegant white linen dress that accentuated her 7-month pregnancy. Her usually warm demeanor was gone. replaced by the chilling calm of a woman who had just seen her world burn to the ground. She sat across from me, her designer clutch placed precisely on the table. "You sent the message," she said. It wasn't a question. "I did. How long did you suspect something was wrong?" 6 weeks. I brought in a private investigator. He followed Sienna. Every photo he took was in a public place. Completely legal. Her knuckles were white around her phone. "Why tell me?" I leaned forward, keeping my voice even. "Because he bankrupted my father's company, and now he's using your money to destroy your life. We could be very helpful to one another. I would never work with you." "You don't have to work with me, Isabella. You just have to hate him more than you dislike me." She was silent, her eyes darting from me to Ben. She didn't touch her water. "I loved him," she said, her voice barely audible. "When he came to me with the investment plan for the new restaurant, I believed every single word. He showed me falsified profit projections, invented investor commitments. He claimed you were trying to sabotage his reputation. He said you were jealous of his success, and you believed him. He was the father of my child." Her tone was sharp. I was pregnant. I wanted to build a future with him. I kept my expression neutral. Isabella dabbed the corner of her eye with a fingertip. "He asked for my help. He said he needed my family's inheritance as seed money to secure the location. He asked me to sign over my portfolio. Just temporary, he said, just to show the bank he had the capital. He said it was all for our family, for our baby." A cold dread seeped into my bones. "So you gave him everything, yes." Her eyes met mine, a single tear finally breaking free and tracing a path down her cheek. "I helped him build this empire." "And he was with her that entire time." Her voice broke on the last word. I sat back. I had expected accusations. I had braced myself for denial. I hadn't been ready for this quiet, devastating admission. "How long has it been going on?" I asked softly. "A year, maybe longer. Who can say?" She took out a mirrored compact, attempting to repair the slight smudge beneath her eye. "He claimed they were late-night menu development sessions. He called them meetings with suppliers, and I just nodded and smiled and played the supportive wife. Because I'm an idiot." "You're not an idiot, Isabella. You're a woman who was manipulated by a master con artist." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "And a lot of good that does me now." Ben slid a document binder across the glass table. "This is a proposal for a strategic partnership. If you agree to file for divorce citing the infidelity clause and provide us with actionable evidence of financial misconduct, we will fund your legal battle and ensure you are the sole beneficiary of the liquidation." Isabella's eyes shot up. "Liquidation? You have a son on the way, correct? A little boy?" She stared at him, her breathing shallow. "How do you know about that?" "I know everything, Isabella. With this plan, you can secure his future. You can build something of your own. If I say no, then you fight him alone. His lawyers will drag this out for years. Breach of prenup, character assassination. By the time it's over, your son will be in kindergarten and your inheritance will be gone." She reached for the binder. Her hands were shaking slightly. "How do I know I can trust you?" I met her gaze directly. "Because unlike your husband, my motives are perfectly clear." The air was thick with the scent of rain and unspoken history. "What do you need from me?" she asked at last. "Everything. The real bank statements, the private expense accounts, the offshore holding companies, every secret deal, the complete picture. I need undeniable proof that Leo has been using marital assets to fund his affair. I need proof that he defrauded you from the start." Isabella reached into her handbag and pulled out a small, leather-bound ledger. She set it on the table between us. "I started making copies of his private office records 3 months ago," she said, her voice low. "I didn't know what I was looking for. I knew something was wrong. I thought he was hiding money from me before the baby came. I never guessed it was for her." I reached for the book. "What exactly is in here?" "Every cash payment for the last 2 years, detailing the plan to systematically undervalue his assets in case of a divorce, and his notes on coaching his business manager on what to say if I ever asked questions. What else?" "The statements from 2 undeclared accounts, over $8 million. He's been skimming profits from his suppliers for years. The wire transfers, the incorporation documents for a shell company in the Cayman Islands. My pulse quickened. This was the Holy Grail. And there's something else, Isabella added. I have the original jewelry designs, the ones for my engagement ring, and the bracelet he gave me for our anniversary. The jeweler sent me the file. Her bracelet is an exact copy. The design notes are in Leo's handwriting. I had copies made because I was afraid he was planning to leave me after the baby was born. She let out another hollow laugh. Seems I was right about that, at least. Ben opened his portfolio, took out a folder, and laid it on the table. Inside was a formal partnership agreement. 5 pages of dense legal language with signature lines at the bottom. Read it closely, Ben said. This offer is only on the table tonight. Isabella scanned the pages, her lips moving silently. The process took her nearly 10 minutes. When she was done, she looked straight at me. I have one condition, which is I want your guarantee that her name is on every single legal document. I want to talk about Sienna, the condo he leased for her, the trips, all of it. I want the world to know exactly who she is and what she did. He deserves to lose more than his restaurants. I looked at Ben. He gave a subtle nod. That can be arranged. Ben took a pen and added a new clause to the agreement. Isabella read it, nodded sharply, and signed her name with a flourish. She slid the document back across the table. It's done. I held a small rose gold burner phone in my palm. It was sleek and light. It felt like nothing, but it held the power to dismantle his entire world. David slid the signed retainer agreement into his briefcase. This is going to destroy him. I looked at David. Do you have any regrets? He was quiet for a moment, then he said, Yes, but my belief in what's right is stronger. For now, that's enough. I nodded. For now, that was everything. 3 days later, auditors from the IRS showed up with a court order. David's tip had been 47 pages long. Every single word was the gospel truth. The agents didn't bother with a polite knock. At 6 a.m. on Thursday, 16 agents began the audit of Thorn Restaurant Group. By midday, 2,847 financial records had been seized. By sunset, Ethan's business was under federal investigation. The IRS arrived in 6 black sedans. They didn't knock. They presented the warrant to the terrified hostess at Legacy and swarmed the main office. I wasn't there, of course, but David called me at 6:15 a.m. and gave me a play-by-play. Agent Miller, the lead on the case, went directly to Ethan's private office on the 2nd floor. Ethan was already at his desk, staring wildly at his laptop. He had been there all night. As the agents entered, Ethan tried to drag a folder labeled Personal Finances to the trash icon. He clicked the mouse frantically, his hand shaking. Agent Miller put a hand on his wrist. Step away from the computer. This is my private business. Not today, it isn't. Step back. They took his laptop. They took his personal phone. They opened his desk drawers and began pulling out ledgers, receipts, vendor contracts, and bank statements, absolutely everything. By 7:30, they had already filled 23 document boxes. At 7:45 a.m., Agent Miller informed Ethan of the scope of the audit. Ethan Thorn, this is a formal investigation into tax evasion, wire fraud, and embezzlement. They didn't put him in handcuffs. Instead, a week later, they let him walk directly into a televised ambush. He was scheduled for a live cooking segment on a national morning show. As he plated his dish, a process server walked onto the set and handed him the lawsuit, the classic public humiliation. Ethan's face went white, his eyes darting to the cameras. As the host tried to cut to a commercial, he ripped off his microphone and shouted, "My wife is having a mental breakdown. She's pregnant and unstable. This is all a pack of lies." The video was all over social media in less than an hour. At 9 a.m., my in-laws were sitting in the sunroom of their Lincoln Park brownstone, watching the broadcast. David had a contact in their social circle, a friend who was giving me updates. She sent me a text at 9:15. "Your mother-in-law is horrified. Your father-in-law is stone-faced." At 9:30, another message came through. She just whispered, "How could he do that on television?" He responded, "My God, what if Isabella was telling the truth all along? Eleanor, what have we done?" I looked at the text message for a very long time. Then I put my phone away. At 11 a.m., I walked into my lawyer's office for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. The conference room was buzzing. My legal team moved around with binders and laptops. My lead counsel, a small group of them, were whispering in a corner. When I entered, the room felt completely silent. They just stared. Some looked sympathetic, some looked proud. A few gave me a quiet nod of respect. I ignored them all. I walked to the head of the conference table and sat down. Ethan's life was now a public relations disaster, swarming with negative press. David met me in the conference room. "Isabella," he said, "we need you to officially identify which videos on this phone document the conspiracy and which are just personal." I glanced around the table. Hard drives and transcripts of text messages were laid out everywhere. My life. 3 years of my marriage. All of them, I said. Every video where he discusses the restaurant's finances is relevant. Anything that shows him with Chloe, cooking my family's food, that's all part of the fraud. David nodded. "Understood. We will need a signed affidavit for each piece of evidence. I'll sign every single one." I spent the next 2 hours watching videos, confirming dates, and signing my name until my hand ached. At 2 p.m., we met for the settlement negotiation. 12 people were present, 7 on our side, 5 on a video call for Ethan's team. David and I sat at the far end of the table. My lawyer sat beside me. David stood up and gave a summary of the evidence: the stolen recipes, the skimmed profits, the offshore accounts, my testimony, his own statement, and the forensic accountant's initial findings. After he finished, the room was chillingly quiet. Then David stood again. He played a video on the main screen. It was Ethan and Chloe, late at night in the kitchen at Legacy, drinking wine. "My original business plan specified all profits would be reinvested for the first 5 years, David said. His voice was calm and steady. In this video, Ethan brags to his mistress about diverting 40% of the profits to a personal account in the Bahamas to buy her a condo. That's a 100% violation of his fiduciary duty and our marital partnership agreement." One of the investors leaned in. "How do you know Leo was funding her entire life?" Chloe unlocked her phone and slid it across the marble island. On the screen was a high-resolution photo of a famous painting hanging in a living room she'd never seen. Next to it, a selfie of a woman named Sienna, blowing a kiss. The caption read, "My man knows how to decorate a castle." "I took this photo 2 hours ago," Chloe said, her voice steady. "From inside the secret condo he bought her under a shell corporation, the one he's been funneling money into for the last year." The air in their penthouse turned to ice. Her mother-in-law, who was visiting, gasped. Her father-in-law demanded to know if this was some kind of joke. Leo just stared at the phone, the color draining from his face. "My architect's eye for detail is impeccable," Chloe stated. "And Leo's greed just signed our divorce papers." The decision was instantaneous. His mother slapped him across the face. A motion to call the family lawyer passed unanimously. A motion for Leo to leave the property immediately passed, 2-1. At 9 p.m., I was standing in my sister's guest room, not our penthouse, looking out at the Chicago lights. My sister came to stand next to me. "You did it." "For now," I replied. "What's that mean?" "This whole family is built on secrets. Leo learned from the best. I have no intention of fighting a war on two fronts. So what's your plan?" "To burn it all down. I'm handing everything to my lawyer. Leo earned this. He's the one who lied. He's the one who thought I was a fool. Let him have the consequences." Ethan studied my face. "And you?" he asked. "What's next for Ava?" "I'm going to open a new design studio, somewhere far from here, maybe by the coast." By 6 p.m., the news had become a Category 5 hurricane in the media. Every outlet was leading with the story. Ava Moreno, celebrated designer, vindicated. Real estate mogul, husband arrested for fraud. My phone had vibrated 127 times. I turned it off. I just sat in my rented apartment, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The lights of the city below started to glitter. It looked just like it did 3 years ago, but I wasn't the same woman who had fallen in love with that view. Ethan handed me a glass of sparkling water with a slice of lime. So, what's the first move? A small smile touched my lips. Tomorrow we take back what's mine. He raised an eyebrow. The Brickell penthouse. It's my property legally. A premarital asset I purchased with cash 10 years before I'd ever even heard the name Liam Sterling. His parents moved in to help with my pregnancy. It seems they've conveniently forgotten whose name is on the deed. I took a sip of my water. I hadn't forgotten. At 2 p.m. on a sweltering Tuesday, two professional moving vans and a sheriff's cruiser pulled up to the curb. I stepped out of a black car wearing a pristine white suit. My lawyer right beside me, a freshly issued eviction notice clutched in my hand. I had pictured this exact moment every night for a year. The waterfront penthouse was at the top of a private keycard access elevator. 8,500 square feet of white marble and glass overlooking Biscayne Bay, with a wraparound terrace that defined the very essence of new money. The movers were waiting at the service entrance. Deputy Sanchez was at the front door with a clipboard. A few neighbors peeked from their doorways, phones already recording. My in-laws had not made any effort to pack. Not a single box was taped shut. A couple of Louis Vuitton suitcases sat by the door as a token gesture. Catherine stood beside them, her hands clenched. Robert was just behind her, his face a thundercloud of fury, his jaw set like concrete. Sophia was nowhere in sight. She'd been arrested that morning as a co-conspirator. No one had called Liam's sister Olivia yet. Or maybe they had, and she'd wisely decided to stay away. The elevator doors opened with a quiet chime. I stepped out, my lawyer following. We crossed the cavernous marble foyer. Deputy Sanchez nodded. Miss Moreno. Deputy? He read the eviction notice in a firm, clear voice. By order of the Miami-Dade Court, Robert and Catherine Sterling are to vacate this residence effective immediately. You may take personal effects only. All property, art, and furnishings acquired with funds from Sterling Estates or currently under investigation for asset forfeiture must remain. Catherine was the first to break. The designer handbag she was holding slipped from her grasp, hitting the polished floor with a muffled thud. She lunged toward me, her hands outstretched. Ava, please, this is our son's home. Think about the baby. Think about... I walked right past her. I didn't slow my pace. I didn't turn my head. I didn't even acknowledge her presence. Catherine stumbled back against the wall, all her cultivated composure gone. Robert tried to salvage some shred of his authority. He squared his shoulders. You should consider the consequences of this, he said in a low growl. The media, the value of the company, the family name. I finally turned to face him. My voice was ice. The media is already having a ball. I couldn't care less about the company. And as for the family name, I let a cold smile form. You let your son tarnish that all on his own. The color drained from Robert's face. Olivia's town car pulled up 10 minutes later. She emerged with a quiet, dignified poise, her face impossible to read. She walked to the doorway and gently placed a hand on Catherine's arm. Mother, she said softly. She's in pain. We need to give her space. Catherine looked up at her, her face a ruin of expensive, tear-streaked makeup. Olivia, talk to her. Make her see reason. Olivia's eyes found mine, across the room. We held each other's gaze. There was no sympathy there, but there was something else, a silent understanding. She looked back at her mother. I can try. She walked over to me, pitching her voice so her parents could hear. Ava, this is all a bit much. They are still your family. But her eyes were telling me something entirely different. They were saying, don't back down. Robert grabbed Olivia's elbow. Tell her, Olivia. Tell her how irrational this is. Olivia looked at him. She scanned the penthouse, filled with art and furniture bought with stolen money. She looked back at her father. You made this mess, Dad, she said, her voice even but sharp. You testified for him during the preliminary hearing. You let Liam lie about everything. You picked a side. She delicately pulled her arm from his grasp and turned away. Catherine pushed herself off the wall. She picked up her single handbag and walked to the elevator. She pulled out her phone and ordered a car. Robert called after her. Catherine, where do you think you're going? She didn't look back. Somewhere honest. The elevator arrived 3 minutes later. Catherine stepped inside and the doors slid shut. The setup was supposed to be done by 5. Clara knelt on the Persian silk rug in the nursery, struggling with the final screw on a new bookshelf. She needed the prenatal vitamins Liam was supposed to pick up. Annoyed, she grabbed his briefcase from the hall, hoping he'd just left them inside. Rummaging past blueprints and contracts, her fingers brushed against a velvet jewelry receipt. It was from Cartier, a custom piece, the Serafina necklace. Her heart sank. The anniversary gift he'd given her last month was a simple, elegant bracelet. Curious and trembling, she searched the jeweler's name on her phone. Their most recent social media post featured a star architect, Isabella Rossi, Liam's lead designer, at a gala wearing a breathtaking necklace. The caption read, "The one-of-a-kind Serafina on the brilliant Isabella Rossi." A sharp, angry kick from within her womb made her gasp. An hour later, Liam walked in, beaming about a new high-rise deal. He bent to kiss her, but she recoiled. He looked puzzled. "What's wrong, honey? Is the baby okay?" She held up her phone, the picture of Isabella glowing on the screen. The color drained from his face. He stammered, stepping back. That's a client gift, a business expense." His confident eyes darted away. "It's not what you think." He began rambling, accusing her of going through his things, of letting her pregnancy hormones make her paranoid. "How dare you spy on me?" Her composure finally broke. "You did this?" she whispered, her voice a low, dangerous tremor. She turned and walked into their master bedroom, pulling a suitcase from the closet. He followed, his voice pleading. "Clara, please, the stress isn't good for the baby." He swore he loved her, that Isabella meant nothing. She was just a brilliant architect he couldn't afford to lose to a rival firm. It was just the business. Clara didn't even turn around. By 6:30 the suitcase was packed. Liam stood in the doorway blocking her escape. He begged her not to leave, not to throw away their entire future over one stupid, meaningless gesture. She pushed past him and locked herself in the nursery. The smell of fresh paint and new beginnings choked her. On the other side of the door, Liam's pleading turned to frustrated banging. Her phone buzzed. It was Ava. "Are you all right?" Clara shook her head, unable to speak. Ava's tone hardened. "I'm on my way. Do not, under any circumstances, leave that apartment. He's the one who has to go." Ava, her best friend and the most ruthless divorce attorney in Chicago, was now running the show. The war had begun. Clara stood alone in the baby's room, walking over to the wall where their wedding pictures hung. Images from Lake Como, laughing on a sailboat, the two of them looking completely untouchable. She took down the largest one from their first anniversary and laid it face down. Through the massive window, she watched the fog burn off Lake Michigan. She watched her husband give up and fall asleep on the living room sofa. She watched him wake up and mechanically start the coffee maker. One hot tear traced the path down her cheek. She wiped it away with fury. "So this is what it feels like," she murmured to the empty room. The next morning, a text from Ava lit up her screen. His lawyer accepted service. Months ago, that news would have destroyed her. Now it was just the opening salvo. The first meeting was set for 2 weeks, Sterling versus Sterling, in the Superior Court. 6 weeks to dismantle 3 years of a carefully constructed lie. She made herself sit at their dining room table every day, right where he would see her. The affair had cost her a marriage. This fight was going to cost him an empire. The law offices of Wexler and Zane occupied the entire 35th floor of a downtown skyscraper. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. This was the kind of conference room where dynasties came to die. The air was thick with tension. Lawyers, paralegals, and public relations specialists lined the walls. Ava sat beside her, calm and focused. At the far end of the table sat Liam's lawyer, Marcus Thorne, 61, with silver hair and a reputation for financially ruining spouses. He was the man who had drafted their ironclad prenup. Now he was here to decide if Liam Sterling would walk away with his 9-figure fortune. My lawyer Ava stood at the head of the polished table, the same woman who had been my maid of honor 3 years prior, the same one who had assured me the prenup was just a formality. The bitter irony was not lost on me. Liam sat at the opposite end, his handsome face a mask of outrage. His lawyer, Marcus Thorne, was 52, impeccably dressed, and known for his aggressive tactics. But Ava had him on the back foot, and they both knew it. The first week was pure discovery. It took 3 days just to get the initial financials. I studied every line item: a new construction startup, a portfolio of commercial real estate, a private equity fund, a priceless art collection. The defense tried to claim every single asset was firewalled by the prenup. The judge disagreed. On day 4, Ava gave her opening statement. "This is a case about grand larceny disguised as a marriage," she said, her voice steady and clear. Liam Sterling didn't just have an affair. He methodically embezzled marital assets, committed wire fraud to conceal his spending, and manipulated his pregnant wife into believing they were partners, all while planning to use a fraudulent document to shield his theft. She projected 2 sets of financial statements onto the screen behind her: our joint investment account and a Shell Corporation's account, showing perfectly mirrored transfers. "There are 3 people in this marriage," she concluded. "This was calculated, this was criminal." And the defendant knew exactly what he was doing. Marcus Thorne rose for the defense. "This is a case about a scorned wife weaponizing her pregnancy for financial gain." He continued, "Romantic entanglements are not criminal offenses. Clara Sterling benefited from this marriage for 3 years. She is emotional, she is vengeful, and she is leveraging her family's considerable influence to punish her husband." The lawyers all turned to look at me. I kept my expression unreadable. Liam's former executive assistant testified on Monday morning of the second week. Ava asked her to recall the events of August 15th, 2025. The assistant, a young woman with her hands folded tightly in her lap, spoke in a quiet voice. "Mr. Sterling came into the office very early, around 6:30 a.m. He instructed me to book a first-class trip to Dubai. He said Miss Rossi needed to be on the same flight. I asked for a project code for the expense report. He just said, 'Don't ask questions, just do it.' What happened next? I booked the tickets. Miss Rossi arrived at his hotel at 7:15 that evening. What he didn't know was that I had already booked his wife a surprise ticket for that same weekend, a trip he had me cancel at the last minute. He told me to lie about it, but it was too late. The cross-examination was brutal. Marcus Thorne painted the assistant as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. She didn't even flinch. "I should have said something 3 years ago," she said, her voice gaining strength. "But Mr. Sterling threatened my career. I have 2 children. I was scared. That doesn't make me a liar. It just makes me human." I met her gaze as she left the courtroom. I gave her a slight nod. She nodded back. A forensic accountant testified on Tuesday. He admitted to everything under oath: the $85,000 necklace, the 3 wire transfers, the falsified expense reports. Ava put the bank records up on the screen. 3 deposits: March 12th, April 8th, and May 20th. "Mr. Sterling told me it was a retainer for a ghost corporation," the accountant testified. "He assured me that Mrs. Sterling was fully aware of the Shell Company." I took him at his word. Marcus Thorne pounced. "You are testifying today in exchange for immunity from prosecution, are you not?" "Yes. So tell the court, why should we believe a single word you say?" The accountant looked directly at the mediator. "Because it's still the truth." By the end of the second week, the prosecution called Dr. Avery Dane, a financial analyst from Stanford. 63 years old, with wire-rimmed glasses and 30 years of experience, he was the best expert witness money could buy, and Ava had secured him. Dr. Dane walked the mediator through my initial marital assets. Mrs. Sterling's contributions accounted for a W14 by 90 initial investment. This portfolio meets all fiduciary standards. It is excellent work. He then pulled up Liam's modified portfolio. Mr. Sterling diverted those funds to a W12 by 65 shadow fund. That constitutes a 32% reduction in community property. A first year business student would recognize that as illegal. He then played a 3D animation of the money trail. The lawyers leaned forward, captivated. The primary account was drained, the offshore account ballooned, the trust fund was violated. $3 million vanished because Mr. Sterling prioritized his affair over his family, Dr. Dane stated. The defense brought in their own expert, but he was young, nervous, and unconvincing. The mediator was clearly not persuaded. On Friday afternoon of the third week, my parents testified. My mother, poised and elegant at 68 years old, took the stand first. She wore a simple black dress. Her hand trembled as she gripped the witness stand. My daughter Ava was destroyed by his greed, she said, her voice cracking. Our first grandchild is due in 3 weeks. That baby will never know what her father was supposed to be. She asks me sometimes. I show her pictures, but it's not him. She looked directly at Liam. You stole her future from us for a fling. My father testified next. My daughter is 33, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She was building a family. His mistress still has the expensive watch he gave her. She keeps it in a case. She can't even bear to look at it. My best friend Clara was the last to speak that day. My client was his partner in every sense of the word, she stated. She poured her soul into saving their marriage. She wasn't supposed to find out any of this. She stumbled on it by accident because she was trying to help him. The courtroom was utterly silent. Liam stared at the table in front of him. He never looked up. He never met anyone's gaze. I wept silently. It was the first time anyone had seen me cry since the trial began. My father passed me a tissue. I dried my eyes and continued to watch. Week 4 was for Sophia. Week 5, Clara would present the forensic accounting that unraveled the fraud. But week 4 was what I had been waiting for. Week 4, Sophia Rossi would finally have to explain herself. On that Monday, Sophia Rossi took the stand. Liam's face went chalk white. Sophia wasn't just there to talk about the affair. She was about to expose the entire conspiracy to hide millions in marital assets. Every word she spoke was another nail in his coffin. Sophia took the stand on Monday evening, the fourth week of the trial. She wore a severe dark gray dress, her makeup immaculate, her dark hair pulled back tightly. She never once glanced at Liam sitting at the defense table. She addressed the jury. The prosecutor, Mr. Harris, stood. Miss Rossi, what was your role in the success of Sterling Estates? Sophia's voice was clear and steady. I was the lead architect who helped my CEO build a $19.7 million real estate empire. I secured landmark contracts. I shaped our brand's public image, and I helped him conceal a long-term affair. Harris projected blueprints onto the large screens behind them, 156 pages of them. Sophia walked the jury through every detail of the secret waterfront mansion, the offshore accounts used for construction payments, the shell companies in the Bahamas that paid for the imported Italian marble. Then Harris displayed a text message dated 2 months before my due date, from Sophia Rossi to Liam Sterling. Subject: complication. We need a plan for Ava. She'll never give up her share that easily. She's too sharp. We need a permanent solution. Liam's reply: handling it. Trust me. A gasp went through the courtroom. Liam's lawyer stood for cross-examination. You're testifying to get a lighter sentence, are you not? Yes. You discovered he was seeing other women besides you. This is personal, isn't it? Sophia looked directly at him. It's both, but that doesn't change the facts. The jury believed her. Ben testified on Tuesday of week 5. He wore a dark suit. His hands were steady as he was sworn in, but I could see a small muscle twitching in his jaw. Mr. Harris asked him to walk the court through the financial trail, the fraudulent construction invoices, the doctored expense reports. Ben explained it all with methodical precision. And then Harris asked, when did you first realize your CEO was planning to defraud his wife? Ben paused, taking a breath. 3 weeks before the fraud was exposed. Why then? Ben held up a document for the court to see. I found Liam's calendar notes from his server. He'd scheduled a strategy meeting with his divorce attorneys for 9 a.m. on September 12th, 2025. Harris leaned in. What is the significance of that date? Ben looked over at me for a split second. At 8:45 a.m. that same morning, Liam sent his wife an email confirming their final appointment with the interior designer for the baby's nursery. She arrived at the design studio at 9:15. The meeting with his lawyers was at 9:30. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Mr. Carter, Harris said slowly, his voice low, are you telling this court that Liam Sterling let his pregnant wife believe he was joyfully planning their child's future while he was in a meeting actively plotting to leave her with absolutely nothing? Ben's voice cracked as he answered, yes. He was going to claim she was emotionally unstable due to the pregnancy. When that failed, Plan B was to paint her as a gold digger. The charity ballroom went still. My lawyer Dana held up her hand for quiet. Dana projected another image onto the main screen. A text exchange between Leo and Sienna. She's getting suspicious, just lay low. Sienna's reply, don't worry, baby, she's too busy nesting to notice you're building me a nest of my own. Leo's lawyer jumped up. This is an invasion of privacy. This is inadmissible. Overruled, the event's MC, a retired judge, boomed into the microphone. The speaker may continue. I sat frozen at my table. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My husband had been laughing at me. My sister put her hand on my shoulder. I was shaking. Leo had taken the stage just minutes before. It was a calculated risk. His PR team had begged him not to. But Leo was arrogant. His lawyer had asked him pre-screened questions. Did you have a disagreement with your wife? All couples do. We're working through it. Do you value your family? It's everything to me. My unborn son is my world. Dana stood up from her table for the Q&A. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Mr. Sterling, explain this text. She's too busy nesting. Leo faltered. That could mean anything. A nickname. It was sent at 2:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. I don't recall. You don't recall mocking the mother of your unborn child? I didn't mock anyone, but you did buy another woman a home? Leo's face went crimson. She was blackmailing me. That painting should have been in my home. My eye discovered it. I deserved that respect. The ballroom was utterly silent. Leo's lawyer slowly sat down, covering his face. Leo heard what he'd just admitted. He tried to walk it back. I just mean for our collection, but the damage was done. The unofficial verdict came from the crowd's whispers. Dinah simply nodded. Leo Sterling didn't just cheat, he plotted a year of deception, and he intended to make his pregnant wife feel insane for noticing. She pointed right at Leo. Arrogance, infidelity, and gaslighting, all proven in front of 500 of your closest friends and investors. Leo's father's closing argument was weak. He walked on stage, took the mic, and talked about youthful mistakes, about misunderstandings, about privacy. The audience didn't buy it. The court of public opinion deliberated for the rest of the night. I waited in the hotel suite upstairs. My sister sat beside me. No matter what a judge says, everyone here knows the truth. I need him erased, I said. He has to become a ghost. My sister nodded. He will be. On Monday morning, the calls came. The story was on every gossip site. Investors were pulling out of his new skyscraper project. Leo sat in his lawyer's office. His face a mask of fury. The chairman of his own board called. We stood by you during the SEC investigation, Leo. We can't stand by you on this. Has the board reached a decision? Leo asked. The chairman paused. We have, son. He took a deep breath. You need to stand down. Ethan stood, his face ashen. A tremor ran through his hands. First, a breach of the partnership's code of conduct. The verdict, expulsion. Second, embezzlement of company resources. The verdict, expulsion. Third, a violation of his non-disclosure agreement. The verdict, expulsion. Fourth, a conspiracy to defraud his partners. The verdict, expulsion. The ballroom erupted. His rivals smirked and raised their glasses. Journalists scrambled, their phones held high. Ethan crumpled into his seat, burying his face in his hands. I shut my eyes, a single tear tracing a path down my cheek. My friend Lena gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. It's done. The president of the guild tapped his microphone. Silence. The transition of all Ashford projects will begin immediately, concluding on January 22nd. Mr. Ashford is to be removed from the premises. 2 security officers materialized, clipping a lock on his portfolio case before leading him from the grand ballroom. His eyes never found mine. I walked out into the biting Chicago wind. Lena was right beside me. The media descended like vultures, shouting my name. Lena shielded me from the worst of it, and that's when I saw them. Ethan's parents, Eleanor and Richard, standing beside a black car at the curb. Eleanor took a hesitant step toward me. For the first time in 5 years, I turned my back and kept walking. The final arbitration was January 22nd. The arbitrator was blunt. Mr. Ashford, you have leveraged every ounce of trust for your own selfish gains. It was the last I would see Ethan as anything but a ghost. The next time he would be on the other side of a lawyer's desk. The ballroom was still buzzing one last time on that cold January night. It was freezing outside, the kind of Chicago wind that cuts right through you. The holidays were a ghost. Festive lights glittered on Michigan Avenue, but they offered no warmth. There was no joy in our penthouse. I arrived with Lena and my lawyer Ben. We claimed the front row seats I had reserved for the awards night. His parents hovered near the back, a chasm of velvet ropes and 2 months of deceit separating us. They were facing their own social fallout for their complicity. Ethan was ushered in by the one lawyer who hadn't abandoned him. He wore a designer suit that now looked too big for him. His hands were jammed in his pockets, his face was a pale mask, his eyes were vacant, his shoulders stooped. He looked diminished, a man hollowed out from the inside. He refused to look at me. The guild president took the stage. We rose. Please, just eat something. The quiet in our penthouse was a physical wait, punctuated only by the distant wail of a siren 40 stories below. Ethan stared at me, his eyes begging for a mercy he hadn't earned. The trial of our marriage had officially begun. I spoke first. I stood by the vast windows overlooking the lake, one hand resting protectively on my 7-month belly. I had chosen a simple cream-colored dress, the perfect life we'd curated, a masterpiece of deception, was now under the harsh lights. 5 years of marriage was worth nothing to you, I said. My voice was unnervingly steady. I had practiced this speech for a week. But our daughter will learn that integrity is everything, that men who trade their family for a fleeting thrill will answer for it. I was a loyal partner. I deserved respect. Our child deserved a father. I felt the last flicker of love in my heart extinguish. Just weeks ago, I'd sat on our silk sofa, utterly convinced I was the luckiest woman in the world, the co-creator of this perfect existence. Now I was the one bringing the truth to light. Ethan's defense was next. He was 6 feet of manufactured charm, his hair artfully disheveled, his hands open in a gesture of pathetic surrender. Maya, it was a lapse in judgment, he murmured, his voice laced with false regret. It was meaningless. She was just an affair. An affair. The word was so small, so inadequate for the wreckage he had caused. She has a name, Ethan. I held his gaze, refusing to blink. You gambled our entire future, our trust, for an affair. I hope losing everything finally teaches you the value of what you so carelessly broke. She was in her mid-20s, a hungry intern in a sharp black dress, her ambition a palpable force. Sophie Laurent? I saw her photo on the firm's website. My husband didn't just sleep with her. He chose her. He chose his ego. He died to me in that moment. But you? I aimed a shaking finger at him. You didn't just break a vow. You demolished the home we were building, the family we were starting, the future I believed in with all my heart. That is the thing I will never, ever forgive. I sat down. The penthouse was silent, save for the sound of my own shaky breathing. Ethan looked at me. Maya, you have every right to be furious. I got to my feet. My legs felt like they might give out. I walked toward our bedroom. I didn't need a script. For the past 72 hours, this was all I had thought about. A year of mapping out our life together, a year of choosing fabrics for the nursery, a year of realizing my identity had been completely absorbed by his. Ethan took my sense of peace, I said, but he took so much more. He stole my ability to trust, my feeling of safety in my own home. He tried to convince me I was crazy, and when that didn't work, he blamed my pregnancy hormones for my insecurities. I looked at Ethan. He was staring at the polished concrete floor. His expensive suit suddenly looked like a cheap rental. For weeks, I wanted to scream. I wanted you to feel the same agony I felt, but I don't want that now. I want this to be over. I want you to live every day for the rest of your life, knowing you are the sole architect of your own ruin. I wanted him to know that every lie, every secret meeting, every stolen dollar, every single betrayal led him right here. I took a deep breath, wanting him to see that I had survived, that I had begun to rebuild myself, that he had not managed to break me. I returned to my seat. Ethan still wouldn't look at me, but I saw his hands. They were shaking violently. The president of the guild opened the last envelope. He cleared his throat and looked straight at Ethan. "Mr. Ethan Ashford," he began, "you are an acclaimed architect. You built a brand on the promise of innovation and integrity. You have betrayed that promise in the most profound way imaginable. 3 partners' careers are in jeopardy because you put your ego before your firm. Your wife's health was endangered because of your lies. You tried to sabotage her career. You embezzled nearly $2 million to fund a secret life. You lied to your investors. You have expressed no genuine remorse." He paused. The entire ballroom held its breath. "This community sentences you to professional exile. You are no longer welcome here. You are ordered to accept the partnership's buyout for $1.9 million for financial malfeasance and pay $3.5 million to Miss Maya Vance for breach of contract and emotional distress." Ethan's agent jumped to his feet. "On behalf of my client, we intend to appeal. Denied. Security will now escort you out." 2 imposing men in dark suits moved toward the table. They took Ethan by his arms. He rose slowly, his whole body stiff with shock. He glanced at the stage. Then, for the first time all evening, he looked at me. Our eyes met across the room. I gave him nothing. No smile, no tears. I just held his gaze until he flinched and looked away. He was led from the ballroom. The ornate doors swung shut behind him with a final heavy boom. The president continued. "And now for Sophie Laurent, given your active participation and the evidence presented, this board sentences you to a 5-year ban from any associated firm in this state. You will find it hard to build a career." Sophie stood, her face white, shaking. She managed a single convulsive nod. An official led her out a side exit as she stared at the floor. "Eleanor and Richard Ashford, you are both facing an 18-month censure from the Architectural Society for aiding and abetting fraud. You will step down from all board positions within 30 days. My former in-laws showed no reaction. Eleanor was sobbing, her face buried in her hands. Richard stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. "Ben Carter, a 3-year suspension from the Financial Guild. You are permanently forbidden from holding any fiduciary role in the design and architecture industry." Ben gave a slow nod. He was led away. The president closed his folder. "This concludes this emergency hearing." 1,000 whispers rushed to fill the silence. Outside, the January air was sharp and cruel. My friends, Lena and Oliver, flanked me. Reporters shouted my name, their camera flashes like tiny explosions. I stared straight ahead. I refused to give them a single word. And then I saw them. Ethan's parents, standing by the line of black cars. Eleanor rushed over, her face a mess of tears and running mascara. "Maya, my dear, this is all just a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. We had no idea he was being unfaithful. Please, if you would just let us explain." "You had 2 months to believe me," I said. My voice was calm, arctic. I had played this scene over and over in my head. "You had 2 months to pick up the phone, to ask me one question. to have a single doubt about his perfect narrative. You chose not to. You chose him, and now you have to live with that choice for the rest of your lives. Richard stepped forward. We're sorry, we were wrong. Can we please just talk this through? I looked at him, at both of them. I felt nothing at all. Not anger, not sadness, just a cold, empty space where family once was. No, I said. I walked straight past them. Oliver and Lena fell into step beside me. Lena glanced at me. You okay? I will be. 2 days later, I was sitting in a sunlit conference room at Lena's law firm. David sat across from me, a crisp manila folder resting on the glass table between us. The final papers for the Thorne estate separation are ready, Chloe, he said gently. I took the pen, signed my name on the last line, and slid the folder back to him. Marcus just watched, his face a mask of disbelief. Are you really going through with this? He asked, his voice hollow. I'm starting over, I replied, not looking at him. Building something that's actually mine, something that isn't built on a foundation of lies. You can keep the penthouse, the cars, the entire portfolio. It was never what I wanted. David stood, clearing his throat. I'll file these first thing in the morning. He gave my shoulder a supportive squeeze before seeing himself out. The silence he left behind was deafening. Thank you, Marcus whispered to the empty space where I sat. Just take care of yourself, I said, my voice flat. That evening, in my new small apartment, I scrolled through a local society blog on my tablet. The headline read, Chicago's power couple implodes, Marcus Thorne's affair exposed. It included a photo of Marcus rushing away from his office and another of me, stone-faced, leaving our building with a single box. I closed the tablet. I sat in the dark, looking out at the Chicago skyline. The lights of the city I once loved felt alien and cold. The life I had helped build was a ruin. It was finished. So why did I feel like the war had just begun? A year later, a message appeared in my inbox from an unfamiliar email address. The subject line was just 2 words, Marcus Thorne. I stared at the request to meet for 3 whole days. I'd minimize a window, then maximize it again. I called my sister Sophie, who told me I owed him absolutely nothing. On the 3rd day, I finally typed a reply. I named a small, obscure cafe. Yes, the meeting would be in a quiet corner of Lincoln Park, far from our old, glittering world. Simple, anonymous, but public. A year has passed, and I am not the woman I was. I'm healing, but the scars are a part of me now. I agreed to this meeting to find a final, quiet end. My new art gallery is nestled on the 2nd floor of a restored brick building in the West Loop. A simple, elegant sign reads, Sterling. It's small, curated, and fiercely mine. I have 12 people on my team, and our featured artists change every month. On the wall behind the reception desk hangs the Chicago Art Critics Emerging Curator of the Year award. I won it last month. Sophie sent a note that said, This is only the beginning. David sent a crate of champagne, not for a memory, but for a new venture. My happiness is found in the quiet moments, unpacking a new artist's work, creating something real from a simple idea. This time, no one else's drama can touch it. The choice to see Marcus took a week of internal debate. Sophie had insisted, You don't need his closure. I told her, I know, this isn't for him, it's for me. A true full stop. I took a rideshare across the city on a gray December afternoon. December, the circle was now complete. The sky was a heavy, unforgiving steel, and a bitter wind whipped down the streets. I sat at a small corner table for 5 minutes, my hands wrapped around a porcelain mug for warmth, focusing on my breathing. The cafe was cozy with dim lighting and the rich smell of roasted coffee beans. The murmur of quiet conversations was a comforting blanket of sound. A young barista with green hair called out an order for Marcus. I glanced up. He was a ghost of his former self, sitting at table 7. I waited. Memories of our other life flooded in. The sharp scent of expensive cologne, the clink of crystal glasses, the fake brittle smiles of people who traded their souls for status. But now I was just watching. Now I held all the power. I could get up and leave at any moment. This cafe was not a Michelin-starred restaurant. It was a comfortable, neutral space, contained by four walls. Two neat rows of tables filled the room, with framed prints of old Chicago on the walls. I sat at table 7 and held my ground. The tiny bell on the door chimed, and Marcus walked in. I barely recognized him. The cashmere sweater he wore was a size too large, hanging off his frame. He'd lost at least 30 pounds, hollowing out his cheeks and making his shoulders look frail. There were streaks of gray at his temples that hadn't been there before. His hands trembled as he slid into the chair opposite me. He couldn't look at me directly. "You're here?" His voice was rough. "I honestly didn't think you would show up." "I almost didn't," I said. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Marcus swallowed, his throat clicking. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet." He stared down at his hands, the fingers that once sported a heavy gold university ring, now pale and thin. "Chloe, I'm sorry. I know how empty that word is now. So very sorry." I didn't say a thing. Just let him squirm. "I've had a year to think. To do nothing but think." He drew in a shaky breath. "I was so jealous. Ever since you opened your first gallery, you had this light, this passion that was all your own. My father raised me to be a titan of finance, but you were the one with the real vision. I couldn't handle it. The pressure from my family to be more, to acquire more, it just twisted something inside of me." His voice cracked. "That's not an excuse. I humiliated 3 different families with my behavior. I tried to humiliate you," he whispered, his eyes filling with tears. "I destroyed our marriage. I destroyed you. I am not asking for your forgiveness. I just needed you to hear it from me. I am sorry, truly, profoundly sorry." I remained silent for what felt like an age, watching him unravel, watching the chasm between us. I felt no pity, I felt no anger. All I felt was a vast, cold emptiness. "Marcus," I said, my voice perfectly level, "I came here for one reason." He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "There will be no forgiveness. Not now. Not ever." He physically recoiled as if I'd slapped him. "You didn't just steal 3 years of my life," I continued. "You stole my chance to become a mother." Marcus looked utterly lost. "What are you talking about?" "The stress, the betrayal. The doctors were very clear. The complications from the public humiliation you caused. I lost the baby." I held his gaze, refusing to let him look away. "You took my home, our friends, my sanity, and our child. And you did it all while looking me in the face every night, telling me you loved me." Marcus shook his head, tears finally spilling over and running down his face. I I had no idea. I didn't. "I am not forgiving you," I interrupted, my tone like ice. "Forgiveness is for people who make mistakes. You made choices, deliberate, selfish choices. You chose your ego over our vows, your own gratification over our family, your pride over the lives of 3 other people." I leaned in, my voice as chilling as the wind outside. "Choices always have consequences. A shattered reputation is your consequence. Never forgiving you is mine." He stared at me as if seeing me for the very first time. "Do you hate me?" I considered the question for a moment before giving him the honest answer. "No, I don't hate you. Hate requires energy. I have no more energy to spend on you. You are just a man I used to know." I paused. The husband I married never really existed. He let out a ragged sob. "My parents, they still ask about you in their weekly calls." A bitter, mirthless smile touched my lips. "Let me be perfectly clear. John and Mary Thorne mean nothing to me. I officially reverted to my maiden name 6 months ago. I am Chloe Sterling." I paused for effect. "The Thorne financial dynasty ends with you. I heard David is dissolving the family trust to cover your legal fees. That's the only legacy left." I pushed my chair back and stood. "Goodbye, Marcus. This is the last conversation we will ever have." "Wait," he pleaded, his hands pressed flat on the table as he started to rise. "Are you happy?" I thought about his question. "I'm building something new, something real. It's mine. Built on honesty, not secrets. So, yes, I'm getting there." He sank back into his chair, nodding as tears streamed down his face. "I'm glad you're choosing to be happy." My sister's voice over the phone was my lifeline. "I am," I said. And then I ended the call. Marcus pressed his forehead against the cold window of the cafe, his mouth agape. I didn't look back. I walked directly out the front door. The valet held it open. Will you be needing your car again this evening, Mrs. Sterling? Never, I said. Driving to my sister's apartment across town, my phone buzzed. Chloe, how did it go? It was David, my lawyer. Exactly as I needed it to, I replied. He was quiet for a moment. Clara, the judge signed off on the final asset division. It's 18 million. It's one of the largest settlements I've ever seen in a non-contested divorce. I managed a small, hollow smile. You did it, Marcus. I'm proud of you. Me too, he said. My life was now this: a spare bedroom, 8 cardboard boxes of possessions, tiny sparks of hope for what was next, no sprawling penthouse, no suffocating expectations, no heavy thorn name hanging around my neck. I recently saw the catalog that started it all, an auction preview for a painting priced at $200,000 from a gallery I'd never visited, a portrait that signaled the death of our marriage. Robert, James, David. In my version of the story, there was only one name that mattered: Isabel. That's how I reclaim my own narrative, by remembering what was real. I'm talking to a therapist, a compassionate woman who works with trauma survivors. She's patient, letting me move at my own pace. We haven't discussed the future much, and maybe that's for the best. I still go to my OB/GYN checkups every month. Dr. Evans says my stress levels have improved dramatically. She asked me how it felt to finally see Marcus. I told her it felt like relief. I don't speak to his parents. Their assistant reached out twice. I had my own assistant decline both times. Some bridges are meant to be burned. My sister brings dinner over once a week. We laugh. We talk about the gallery. She never asks about him. She just knows. People ask me if I regret my refusal to forgive. They say forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not the other person. I don't believe that. For me, withholding forgiveness is a final act of self-defense. It is a firm declaration that what you did was unforgivable. It's my way of protecting what is left of my own heart. Some wounds never fully close. They become scars. Some violations of trust can never be repaired, and some people simply do not deserve to be forgiven. Tonight I sit in my sister's guest room, my new project spread out on the desk, blueprints for my gallery's next big exhibit. A space for new artists, a new community, a safe harbor built by me. I want their work to be seen. I want it to be a place of hope. As I work late, the city lights twinkle outside. The Chicago skyline is laid out before me, shimmering like a promise. My phone buzzes. My sister, her daily check-in. You okay? I'm okay. Really? Okay, good. Love you too. I click the phone off. Back to the instructions for the baby's mobile. The camera of my mind pulls back. The Chicago skyline. Me, building a future in a small apartment, a woman once shattered, now rebuilding herself one piece at a time. Some betrayals are fatal to a relationship. Some choices define who you become. But survival, true survival, is deciding who deserves your future and who belongs in your past, and then living with that choice without a single apology. And to you listening to this story, remember this: the betrayal of a partner is a fire that burns down the whole house you built together. I learned that the hard way. 3 times I prayed to God in that empty penthouse. Once on day 1, curled up on the cold floor. Once on day 2, when I saw the pictures of her life, a mirror image of mine. And once on day 3, asking not for him to return, but for the strength to burn it all down. God didn't answer with a sign. He answered by giving me the will to fight. This kind of revenge is a messy, painful thing. I got my freedom. Leo is single again. His parents lost the future grandchild they were so excited for. But the cost? I lost the man I thought I knew. Was it worth it? Yes, because my sanity mattered more than the beautiful lie we were living. Here's my advice. Don't be like me. Don't wait for a picture to prove what your gut is screaming. Don't let disrespect become a pattern. Build your walls high. Walk away from anyone who chooses their own ego over your heart, even if you share life with them. Forgiveness is a choice. Self-respect is a requirement. I spent 3 days planning my revenge because I had nothing left to lose. You don't have to. Learn from what I went through. Trust that feeling in your stomach, document everything, and never ever let anyone, husband or not, make you feel crazy. One more thing, this nightmare taught me that family isn't a last name, it's loyalty. It's my sister who gave me a key and asked no questions. It's my friends who held my hand. It's my lawyer who believed me when Leo's family called me hysterical. Build your family from the people who choose you, no matter how messy it gets. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about your own worth, your own relationships, your own power, leave a comment below. Tell me, would you expose him or would you walk away quietly? Share this story with someone who needs to feel less alone. And if you want more raw, real, powerful stories about survival, justice, and starting over, subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell because the next chapter is even more intense. Thank you for listening until the end. I know this was a lot, I know it was painful, but you heard my story. That means the world. A word of caution before we go. The stories ahead contain fictionalized elements crafted for educational and reflective purposes. If intense themes of betrayal, marital conflict, or emotional distress are not for you, please feel free to explore other content that better suits your needs. Protect your peace first. Until next time, stay brave, stay true, and never apologize for saving yourself.